No, you love this part of his game, Aaron. That's a touchdown for Missouri. Brady Cook, being decisive, finds a seam and gets it into the end zone from 15 yards out. Second and goal. They don't change it if it's working. Schrader got in, touchdown. Cody Schrader and the Mizzou run game taking it right down the field. Horn with a safe play underneath. It's Burton trying to get his way in, and he does. Luther Burton.
Well, if you put money down on Mizzou to cover the spread, you lost last night, T-Bone. And I know you like gambling. You lost because Mizzou didn't cover the spread. So we're going to start off butchering the Missouri Tigers, correct?
No, that's a good win last night.
35
Tough
to
opponent
10.
like South Dakota.
South Dakota. Who are they, Grant Francis?
The Coyotes.
The Coyotes.
That's what they are.
He just rambled that off to me yesterday, and I'm like, the South Dakota Coyotes.
No,
He's like, I was just looking it up.
You know why? Because I was looking at the odds for Mizzou to win. It was like 96%, and I saw South Dakota Coyotes.
There you go.
Okay.
Well, you nailed it. They did pick up that victory to 1-0 to start the season out at Ferrario Field. Welcome, everyone, into BK and Ferrario. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario with you today. A 35-10 victory. They did what they needed to do. Maybe you were expecting more of a blowout. Maybe you were expecting a little bit more offensive prowess from this Missouri Tigers team, but you got the job done. And there were certain areas of it, T-Bone, last night, watching it, thinking, first of all, it was just nice to have college football back to watch.
There.
And second of all, multiple takeaways for me. One was the quarterback. You got Brady Cook in the first half. You got Sam Horn in the second half. To me, Brady Cook looked like QB number one. Sam Horn, now, some of his opportunities, the team just kind of laid an egg for a little bit in that second half, so he wasn't getting as many reps on the field. But when he did get those reps, it didn't look as precise as Brady Cook did. Second was the running game. The running game that was very prevalent with the new offensive coordinator. And then third, for me, it was more so of they let the foot off of the gas there towards the middle of that first half, and then once they opened up that second half, which expected when you take on an opponent like South Dakota, but I would have liked to see a little bit more ferocity from that Missouri Tigers team. Your thoughts, T-Bone?
Yeah, I had no ferocity, none of that. I think they did everything that I wanted to see. The QB situation was interesting because they talked about how it was going to be a split going into that game with Brady Cook and Sam Horn. I think it's clear they view Brady Cook as the QB number one because not only did they...
But they kept saying on the broadcast that it still is an open competition, according to Drink.
Yeah, I think Drink's lying out both ends of, you know what. But because they did, if they really wanted to do what we're talking about, see both quarterbacks, you have Sam Horn probably start the second quarter. Why? Because you're still in that offensive mindset of, we've got to put up points to beat South Dakota. He threw the ball 5 times. Why?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to throw the ball in the second half.
Because they were just running it.
They just needed to run the ball to run out the clock against South Dakota. So, you couldn't learn anything about Sam Horn. So I think by their actions, they've shown that maybe they're not viewing Brady Cook as QB1 right away, but I think he's got such a marginal lead. I think they're probably going to split the time against Middle Tennessee, but I would expect, Brady Cook's going to be the starter when they get to the Kansas State game, and there's not going to be any question about it. Outside of that, though, offensively, look, I know a lot of people, and I saw this on Twitter because I saw a lot of people saying, oh, he's not throwing the ball deep. He's not throwing the ball deep. Look, that's fine in that offense that they're going to be running. I love the offense that they had last night from Kirby Moore, making sure that they were getting Burden involved.
Yeah.
He looked great in the slot.
He looked awesome.
Can he just be a game manager? And that's what Brady Cook needs to be. Can he be what Tommy DeVito was for the Illini last year? Now, there's a ceiling to that, how many wins you can get. You probably can't take yourself to the next level if you're going to do that. But for Mizzou, they're not looking to get to the next level of a 9-10 win program. They're trying to get to that first level, which is 7-8 wins. And I think Brady Cook's that guy. Sam Horn's clearly got the arm, which is exciting to see. But Brady Cook was good, efficient, and I thought defensively they were great last night. That was about as what I was expecting, how BK had told us, hey, they could be like an Illini defense from last year. And if that's the case, if Brady Cook's the guy that's going to be the game manager, like Tommy DeVito was, Missouri can win 8 games for sure. I thought there were a lot of good things to take away from the Missouri game. Granted, if you were taking anything bad away, it was going to be a long season. So
that looked like an 8-win team to me, and some of it, most of it, because of how Mizzou looked, but also some of it because of the other teams that played last night, and we'll discuss that in just a bit. But to the point that you made on offense, you didn't have to air it out in that game, because I found myself saying that a couple of times, like, why are they not going deep? Like, let's see what this offense looks like. You said it yesterday, T-Bone. Don't sell the farm in week 1 against South Dakota. You don't have to. They were obviously able to utilize the offensive line and Cody Schrader and just dominate that way. And frankly, one of the question marks that I was curious about was how their offensive line was going to hold up. And the offensive line, I thought, did a good job. The flag started to come into play a little bit later into the game. Again, expect it when you're just running the ball as much as you are to wear down that clock. But in the first half, the running game was the prevalent area for that team that says, okay, this is something that has changed for them. So that factor came into it. And then the other one you mentioned was Luther Burden.
See, I wouldn't read too much into the running game just yet, because they clearly had a not only talent but size difference on the offensive line, because any team can look great running the football when they have both of what I just said, a massive talent edge and a massive size difference.
Yeah.
We'll see how the running game translates to Kansas State. It was a good sign to see that they ran
just
for
like
130
Cody
yards.
Schrader.
I think he did look good last night, so I'm not trying to take too much away from him, but I don't want to unlike what I saw from Burden and the offense and Brady Cook looking efficient, which again probably can't take too much away from that from a South Dakota team. The running game a little bit more not as jump the gun and go, oh, yeah, that was really impressive, because it was clear like they were shoving that defensive line back 3 yards before
even
they
their
could
coach
get
said
to them.
in the first quarter, he was like, we've got to be stronger up front because they're manhandling us right now. Luther Burden was the other one. Speaking of manhandle, I mean, that man got beat up so many times. He got targeted. He got thrown into the sidelines after he made a really nice play. But you know what I loved about it? He came out the next snap every single time. Like, Luther Burden looked like a different man to me in that game from what we saw all of last season. And if that's the case, and if you do get that dynamic work of what Moore was able to use as the offensive coordinator, what Brady Cook was able to show as the quarterback, you do have a trio that could create some dynamic plays this season.
And I do want to caution both of us, because I think Luther Burden looked great last night too. Remember last year, I think we said this after the Abilene Christian game, where it was like, whoa, look at how they're getting Burden involved in the offense. And then it was like 3 weeks later, we're like, hey, where's Burden? Like, I thought he looked good, and I think he's going to be better now. He's in his natural spot in the slot. But I did like the way that they were utilizing him, where they're running him behind the line of scrimmage. They're on kind of in motion, trying to see what the defense is set up as. They gave him the ball once on a handoff.
Didn't it make you feel better, though, that, like, last year, to your point, you knew Drink was doing it. This year, you know that the offensive coordinator is running it with Kirby Moore, which tells you, like, that's going to be their area number one to try and get him involved.
Maybe. I think the same can be said from when Drink was calling stuff last year, too. Like, I thought for sure, like, Drink would definitely have him more involved in the offense. And look, not all this is on the play calling and the quarterback. Like, there was clearly a learning curve for Luther Burden last year at the college level. Yeah. But he definitely looked good last night. I like the way that they're able to incorporate him. And I also love the fact, there's a text from 314, Brady Cook is so average. Ugh. I think he's perfect for that offense that it looks like they're going to run. Look, there is a chance Sam Horn has a higher ceiling because he's got a cannon of an arm. And you saw that last night on that very first throw where he threw just a seam, probably, I think it was like 20 yards downfield, threw it in tight coverage, and it was a bullet. Problem with him is there was also a coverage sack against him last night where I don't think he read the defense very well, got confused, and then was sacked. And then his interception was on the run, bad throw behind the receiver, and it leads to that pick. And again, he only had 5 throws. You can't really read too much into his performance. But the fact of the matter that offense, what they want to do is get the ball out quickly. They want to allow their playmakers to make something happen. I saw our guy BK tweet this last night. You know, this offense is built for yards after catch. I think that's right. And if that's the case, Brady Cook looked good last night. Yeah. All you got to do is you got to settle for the easy throws. Trust me, watching Tommy DeVito last year, he went for a deep ball. I always went, oh, what is he doing? Oh, no, that is picked
But when
off.
Brady Cook did go for the deep ball, at least in that first half, he was very accurate with that throw and was able to get Luther Burden the ball as he got separation.
And he's got a bit of a running element to his game, which is something that is nice. And you saw, and I think we had the cut on the return. You think I would remember I made the open. But he had the touchdown run where he ran like 15 yards. yards and showed his versatility where he's able to at least use his legs just a little bit. I'm not saying he's got to use those, but he's a guy that if there's pressure coming, he can do a nice job to get out of the pocket and make some guys miss and use his legs to his advantage.
All right, I got to bring in our guy Grant Francis on this one because, T-Bone, if there's one thing I know that Grant Francis despises more than anything in sports, it's when a kicker misses a field goal.
Why are you anti-kicker?
And the thicker kicker didn't miss one, but 2 field goals last night.
I'm not anti-kicker. I'm anti-kicker missing 34-yard field goals.
Well, I do think that's fair.
The 48-yarder, that's one thing.
And
that's
that was
a
the
long
first
field
kick
goal.
it's the first kick of the season for him. Okay. The second one, when they blew the whistle for the guy off sides and they acted like, oh, well, the whistle went, so it doesn't count. The guy was on the other side of the field and he stepped it back.
Like, in college sports, it's one thing. But still, at that level, you've got to make a 34-yard field goal. Like, geez, I know mistakes happen, but, God, you've had all offseason
Not
to
a
do
good
one
start
thing.
for him.
Yeah, I will say, if there was one concern leaving that Missouri game, it had to be the kicking
because
game.
if you have tight games this season, which you expect to happen, especially in the SEC, that's your difference maker.
And look, maybe they were saying it was windy, so maybe that was just one of those one-offs. We'll see how he does against Middle Tennessee. Like, there will be some serious concern if he struggles a second game.
Absolutely.
But I will say, that was a little alarming to see that the kicking issue, because, we talk all the time, Illini fans know it, Missouri fans know it. There's always something that ends up breaking your heart. And BK going, man, I'm buying into this team. The one area
kicker.
that could just totally derail everything because of close games could be the kicking for the Missouri Tigers.
Imagine that being the BKO of why this team's a 6-win team because the kicker misses it. But
I might hug BK. It would be brutal.
I don't know if he's getting hugs from me, but we did mention that team looked more like an 8-win team last night. Maybe not so much of what they did, but because of what Florida did. And T-Bone, you were texting us immediately. I didn't watch as much Florida because I was kind of locked into the Mizzou game, but that Florida team, how were people believing at the beginning of the year that they were going to be good? Because they looked abysmal. They looked like what Mizzou looked like about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, Florida's
nothing.
Florida's not a good football team.
No.
I know we put them in the toss-up category when you look at Missouri's schedule. It needs to be moved to the win category. Missouri should beat the Florida Gators. I mean, Graham Mertz, who I've seen, he played a lot in the Big Ten with, I can't remember, Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. He always is capable of one good quarter, and the other 3 are terrible. And I think you saw that last night. He's not a quarterback that's going to allow Florida to be competitive in the SEC. Defensively, I think their defense is fine, but they struggled to run the football. They made too many just dumb penalties last night where they had 2 number 3s on special teams on 4th and 2, so it required a penalty that gave Utah a first down. Florida's not a good football team. Do not buy stock in the Florida Gators. And I will say this, too, just sticking with what else happened last night. Nebraska, Minnesota stink.
It was a fun game, though, even though both were just not good teams.
It was a fun game on Big Ten standards because that first half was like 3-0 or 7-3. So Illinois, if you're an Illinois fan, you should leave last night's game watching Minnesota and Minnesota and Nebraska play and go, okay, we should be better than both of those teams. And I think if you're a Missouri fan, you saw Florida and went, okay, I think we should be able to beat them because Florida comes to our house, and Graham Mertz and that team is not a good football team.
He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Tigers will be back in action a week from Saturday when they host Middle Tennessee. We'll get more into college football as we move along here this afternoon. But coming up next, it's pretty obvious the Cardinals would much rather be who they are than what the New York Mets teams are going to be or is going to be going into the offseason. But can they take lessons away from both New York baseball teams? We'll discuss that next on 101 ESPN. So when I make this statement, good thing we're not the Mets, I think all Cardinals fans, if there's one thing they could all agree on, it would be that. Good thing we're not the Mets. Although there might be a little group that would be like, well, at least they got an owner who spends money.
I think there's a bigger group than you think.
Well, as we saw,
we
money
are worse than them right now.
Money doesn't buy happiness, T-Bone, and the Mets fans are probably saying that right now with Steve Cohen.
Happiness.
Well, the reason we bring this up, though, is because according to The Athletic, it seems like the Mets basically are firing everybody. They are starting from scratch. And I also saw the report yesterday that there's a group of Mets players that are going to be going to Steve Cohen to beg him to pay Pete Alonso because the potential of losing him, they're like, hey, we don't have anybody in this clubhouse who keeps us together. Pete Alonso's that guy. So there are a lot more problems with the New York Mets than just, oh, well, they're having a bad season and they didn't sign the right free agents. But it really does make you think like, hey, being the Cardinals, you're in a much better position than the New York Mets, T-Bone, because the Cardinals, they have been able to develop, like it or believe it or not, they have been able to develop the offense from young players. Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar. We've seen it with Alec Burleson. You're starting to see it with Mason Wynn. They're able to develop that. Now, the other side of it might not be as pretty, the pitching, although we're starting to see some signs of positivity. If you're the Mets, what do you do well other than spend money? Because you haven't really developed anything. Your system is bone dry. You don't have guys coming up that can say, hey, he's going to be a part of this future that's going to help us win. So the Mets are in a position to where it puts a little bit more optimism on the Cardinals side.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask, would you rather be in the spot the Cardinals are in or the Mets are in? I think it is the Cardinals because the Mets they are trying to start from scratch, essentially. Now, yes, they will have ownership that will spend more money. There's no if, and, or but about it. But when you look at the Mets, they just cleaned house yesterday in firing most of their player development department. They don't even have a president of baseball operations. They do have a GM that's been kind of running things. But though he's sticking around, it does say a lot that they are looking to try and improve upon him and get someone that is his boss, that is the Pobo, that's going to be making decisions. So their offseason has to start there. And to your point, they don't really have a good young core. When you look at the Cardinals, at least, yes, you've got the quote-unquote old guys, the pillars, and Goldie and Arenado that are at the corners. But we talked about it yesterday. Look at Mason Wynn that the Cardinals were able to draft and develop in the shortened 2020 pandemic draft. Look at Jordan Walker, who was their first-round pick that year. Look at Nolan Gorman, who's had a great second year. And they've got young, talented players that they've been able to draft and develop, at least on the position side. Look, the Cardinals, I'm not going to try and polish this turd. They've done a terrible job in developing pitching. They've been bad at that. And that's where the next pivot is for their player development, is how do we develop legitimate starters that can help contribute in our pitching staff moving forward. But they did a great job on the position player side. And it's what allows them to where, unlike the Mets, where it's like, okay, do we really want to spend significant dollars on older players on the free agent market when we just failed in doing that and we don't have a young core to support them? That's where the Cardinals can say, okay, we got the young core on offense. Now we just got to go get the pitching and free agency, which sounds easier than it's harder to do than what we let on and trying to get those guys and be right on those contracts. But it's in a much better position than the Mets, where they were basically doing what the Yankees did, where, okay, we can't develop talent, so what do we got to do? We got to go spend significant dollar figures to go bring guys in. And once you start doing that, you start getting into that, you kind of start chasing your own tail of, okay, we can't develop talent. What do we got to do? We got to go back to free agency. Got to go back to free agency. Yeah, and eventually those contracts run up on you. And you guys, in like the Yankees, the Mets, they got old quickly too. And that's the thing. They never had those young, talented players there.
Well, and you're denying the inevitable. You're denying the fact that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to have nothing in our system. The guys that we spent money on are probably not going to stay healthy because, let's be honest, the guys that you're spending money on are typically somewhere between 29 and 31 years old, which that's not going to last very long if you're trying to keep a window open. So you're denying the inevitable. But you mentioned the Yankees too, T-Bone. And frankly, going into this offseason, it is uncharted waters for this Cardinals team of having to spend a lot of money on free agents to fix a glaring hole. But both Yankees and Mets did that in the offseason, where the Mets said, we need to upgrade our pitching staff. And what they do, they Scherzer and Verlander, and they brought in Jose Quintana. And then you've got the New York Yankees that went younger, but they still went after a guy who had an injury history in Carlos Rodon as they were trying to fill their voids. And I know there are other free agents that were signed. I'm focusing on the pitching. Are there any lessons to be learned from either of those two teams? Because the Mets, like, people could give me the cautionary tales of the Mets of, oh, well, look what happens when you spend $40 million on a free agent. Yeah, that was a $40 million on a 40-year-old free agent pitcher who we all know, Father Time is undefeated. Justin Verlander was going to break at some point. Now, he seems to be doing fine where he's at right now, but I also put into the measurement stick of you have the age, but you also have the environment that he's around, and he's used to one thing, go somewhere new, the New York Mets. Max Scherzer is the other one. The Yankees, I can understand that cautionary tale, but T-Bone, we were screaming that, I was at least screaming that this offseason, like, don't sign Carlos Rodon. He's injured. And if you're going to sign him, you're going to be dealing with an injured player.
Yeah, I'm with you. The Rodon one was the same. I was on the same page as you. I think the lesson that can be learned, and it's more of a kind of long-term lesson, if you will, than just the short term, because the Cardinals do have to spend. Like, you can't sell the fan base on, well, we went out and got one pitcher and we're going to look at our internal options, because your internal options aren't good enough. So they have to spend. Like, that is the clear thing to do this offseason. You got to sign, or at least sign 2 starting pitchers and trade for 1. I think the thing that you can learn from what the Yankees and Mets did is what you said earlier, of where they chase their own tail and continue to go back to the free agent market time after time after time after time. Yes, you do need to supplement your team with free agents, but you can't just do what the Yankees did, where it was, okay, let's hand out another massive contract because we didn't develop another outfield bat to pair with Aaron Judge, so we had to trade for the Stanton deal, which is massive on our books. Oh, we haven't developed a first baseman, so we've got to overpay for a left-handed bat in Anthony Rizzo. Oh, we need a third baseman because we didn't develop. We got to go sign Josh Donaldson. What you have to do is, if you're the Cardinals, the tale you need to learn is, okay, yes, we need to spend on our free agent, on our pitching staff this offseason. Go out and sign your starters, go out and improve your bullpen. But what the lesson is from there is, okay, hopefully by the time that we get to the point where Michaelis and Matz's contracts come off the book in 2 years, we don't have to go back to the free agent market to fill those spots. And the way you fill those spots is, hopefully you do a good job in developing a Tinkins, a TK Roby. You nail the draft with this high draft pick that you're probably going to end up have. Maybe you get a top-end starter in this year's upcoming draft that you look at and you develop through your system very quickly, to where maybe not the year that those guys come off the books, but maybe the year after you have that arm that's available and you have pieces that are in your system like McGreevy, Graceffo. What are those guys? Can they be depth like number 4, number 5 starters for you? I think that's the lesson to be learned is, don't chase your tail in free agency because you can't develop what is needed to be a winning baseball team. You've got to start with development, and then you will have to supplement some pieces in free agency. But you can't do what the Yankees and Mets did, which was, over a significant period of time, failed to develop quality arms in your system, so you have to continue to go out to the free agent market.
Every time we talk free agency, the poster child for me, and Grant, you'll understand this reference, the poster child for me of building a championship contender with free agency are the Chicago Blackhawks. And I say this because you drafted and developed your top 2 guys in Kane and Taves. And you had depth pieces that were there that were a part of it, like the Sods and the Sharps and those pieces. You had Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook, but you knew you needed to put yourself over the top. And what did you do? You spent the money and you went and got Marian Hossa. Now, there are other teams that just go out and throw money around and say, well, let's just get this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. The New York Rangers are a perfect example. I'm just making hockey because it's easier for me to reference. I look at the Cardinals as trying to accomplish what Chicago did. Now, you don't have the 1st and 2nd overall pick to where you can't do that, but what you could do is you have the superstars that you're building around, and then when you get to the right point, which seems to be now, you throw the money at the right free agents and bring them in and say, okay, he puts us over the top. Whereas the Yankees or the Mets, they've got one piece in place, Judge, Pete Alonso, and say, now how are we going to put this together? And so now we're throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at all of these guys, which that's not going to work, because when something happens, age probably, now you're left with nothing, where the Cardinals are hoping that they have other pieces that step up in their absence.
Well, and it does work in hockey, though, at times where you can just go out and, spend all the money on the biggest free agents you can. Obviously, it's a little bit different because of the cap limit. But, I mean, the Vegas Golden Knights are a perfect example of that. Like, anytime there's a high-tier free agent out on the market, Vegas is always involved. Like Alex Pietrangelo, perfect example. Max Pacioretty, I think they traded for him. But just all the time when there's somebody available, they're always in on it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Carolina can be looked at the same way. They do that as well. They're always in on the big free agents. Brent Burns is a perfect example. Like, it works for some teams, but you can't always do that. You have to have your pieces that you build around. I think for Vegas, they only have like 4 or 5 of their original Golden Knights that they picked from that expansion draft. But at the same time, those are your Jonathan Marchessaults and your Riley Smiths, your Shea Theodores. Like the players that they are still building around, their core players, they quote unquote drafted them because it was an expansion draft. But they did build them up from really not being much. Like you got to have a certain level of that in your system, no matter what sport you're in.
Yeah. So it's a cautionary tale, as T-Bone likes to say. It's
a tale as old as time.
What movie is that from?
The Great Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, you're lucky. I told you that earlier. You'd have been like,
The Little Mermaid.
Snow White. Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We got NFL quick hitters coming up next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, Mizzou took down South Dakota 35-10 to start their season out 1-0. Brady Cook went 17 for 21, 172 yards, and a touchdown. Tonight, the Cardinals are back in action against Pittsburgh. It'll be Dakota Hudson on the mound for the Cardinals. Mitch Keller for the Pirates, the righty. He's 11-8 on the season with the 4.01 ERA. First pitch will be at 7:15. And then tomorrow night, City SC is back in action in Kansas City to take on Sporting KC, who is 7-11-8 on the season, fourth worst in the Western Conference in MLS. St. Louis 15-9-2 on the season, which is best in the West. And earlier this season, St. Louis took down Kansas City in St. Louis 4-0. Kickoff tomorrow night at 7:30. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Well, now that we got college football officially underway, we're less than a week away from the NFL officially starting. And alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario on BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We've got Ask Us Anything coming up in about 15 minutes or so. So send us your questions to the Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Let's start with T-Bone's Rams, Grant.
Yeah.
Because there's some
Super Bowl bound.
There is some great news surrounding this team. I'd say first overall pick bound, but they probably traded that one away.
No, we've got our first round pick
Do
this
they?
year.
Well,
Yeah.
they'll probably trade it away at some point. Sean McVay announced yesterday that Cooper Kupp, tell me if you've heard this one before, has had a, quote, setback with his hamstring injury. When asked on if Kupp could play week 1, he said, it's just tricky. There's a difference between return to play and return to performance. We want a return to performance for Cooper Kupp. He's not playing week 1. And frankly, I don't know if he's going to be healthy. What would you say, T-Bone? Week 3? Week 4?
Maybe. I don't think it'll be week 4 because otherwise they'd put him on the PUP list. So I think he's probably missing week 1. My guess is he's probably back week 2 or 3 would be my just guess.
T-Bone, are you even upset about this?
No, they suck.
Okay.
T-Bone wants them to just trade them all away.
The only question that comes from this that is brought up isn't like, oh, how's this impact the Rams? It doesn't matter.
No, it impacts your fantasy football
It
draft.
impacts your fantasy football team. And that's what I want to bring up. Cooper Kupp, question mark going into the year. I saw this today from Alex Caruso, who covers fantasy football. He said Cooper Kupp has suffered 2 hamstring injuries in the last month at 30 years old, but still goes as a top 5 player in fantasy football drafts. Buyers beware.
Yeah, no, I'm not drafting him until I'm in a league tonight, 10 players or 10 teams. If I'm picking 10th, I'm not picking him until the second round, if not the third round on that turn. Because, he might not be available to me until week 3, and he might not be himself until week 4, week 5. But then even on top of that, it's a nagging hamstring injury for a 30-year-old wide receiver, and that scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, I would be very cautious of drafting him. I don't remember where he went in the 101 ESPN Fantasy League, but I think he was top 5, top 7.
I was going to say, I thought he went later.
I know he went first round. Whoever Rocchio picked, because I know Rocchio drafted him, I believe. So I would be very concerned. If you have a pick and you're thinking Cooper Kupp or, I don't know, Travis Kelce, I would take Kelce.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
I have too many concerns about Cooper Kupp's health and availability for early on in the season. And I truly don't think that his fantasy points are going to be that great this year. That offense is going to be awful. They cannot protect Matthew Stafford. I wouldn't be shocked if Stafford gets injured again this year. So I would be very cautious. I think you're right. I would wait till the second round, or at least if you have like that back pick, if you're at 10, 9, or 11, 12, depending on how many are in your league, 13, 14 for us, then maybe you look at drafting him.
See, I'm at that point now where it's like I question it no matter what, and I'm like,
That's
could
where
this
I'm
guy
at.
be better? Because, like, let's take our league, for example. If he would have kept getting pushed back, it would have been either him or, like, Tony Pollard. I'm going Tony Pollard over Cooper Kupp right now.
I would go Kupp because I think anytime there's a tie in my mind, running back / wide receiver, I would take the wide receiver. And though
But if he's got a nagging hamstring injury?
yeah, I still would take him because Pollard, I don't know how much more he's going to be involved in the look. Why was Pollard so great a couple of years ago or last year? It's because, one, he was great with running the football, and he's a big part of the passing game. Well, now that Brandon Cooks is in that offense, how involved is he really going to be in the passing game? Still may be, but I think Cooper Kupp's going to get more target shares. So
at least Pollard's going to be playing meaningful football. That's the other thing in this.
Yeah.
I don't really care for taking players that are going to be playing meaningless football, and you know they're going to be playing meaningless football, because even though they're going to get their touches and they're going to get their receptions, it's not the same as when they're competitive.
Well, and he's got a quarterback that can't understand the youth. So it's not going well for the Rams right now.
Speaking of wide receivers, first of all, the only problem I have with how BK commissioned this league is the fact that it's Yahoo. I can't stand Yahoo Fantasy. ESPN's much better.
I mean, we are on 101 ESPN, so that's always good.
yeah, way to throw everybody under the bus.
Yeah, just BK under the bus.
Yeah.
He was the commissioner.
All right,
Commissioner picks on that one. I got a lot of issues.
Some should be
But-
grateful to be invited in year 2. What do you think of that? I was directed to him.
Well,
pump the
what are you
brakes over
saying?
there.
I'm not supposed to be here. Is that I picked 14th, and I'm
Look,
getting
just because
that.
he's the backup board up doesn't mean you got to treat him like that, man.
Sorry, man.
I get it. I'm inferior. It's okay.
I'm the
That's my team name.
I'm the deputy commissioner, so I just had to at least
He acts
pretend
like he's
to
the
defend
deputy
guy.
commissioner. He's like the deputy guy that wears that little star at home in his PJs and carries around his little toy guns. He's like, I'm the deputy commissioner. Pew, 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 pew.
Makes sense why he picked second then.
Yeah, and BK picked first,
Yeah.
am I right?
It's convenient.
Let's talk about another wide receiver because you think it's bad for the Rams. Well, how about the Buccaneers? Because Mike Evans reportedly does not have a contract extension, and the Bucs have not had any conversations with him. Now, you might be thinking they've got Chris Godwin, so what's the problem here? Because the whole identity of this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team is the weapons that they possess. And if you lose Mike Evans, or if you get the holdout, or if Mike Evans is going to be gone, which I would imagine we're all probably on the same page. If you don't get a contract, he's going to be traded by the deadline this year, because if the Bucs are out of it, why wouldn't you trade away a Mike Evans?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him since he's in this final year. And if they are going to be as bad as I think, and I don't think Baker's going to help them out, and I think they're one of the oldest, if not the oldest team in the NFL, they're going to have to start. I think they're entering a rebuild potentially at the end of the year.
That's what, yeah.
If they don't perform well, I could see where they at least explore the idea of trading Mike Evans. I don't think they're going to give him a contract extension. I saw something interesting today. His kind of separation on routes run was way down last year as he hit the age of 30. But I think you could get something of decent return if they were to explore moving Mike Evans if things go so south that they have to look at it and say, okay, we've really got to sell some pieces off at the deadline.
Part of me tried to convince myself that Mike Evans was going to have a big year because Baker Mayfield's there, and I'm like, oh, you just hit the combination of the two, and it's going to work, right? And then I stayed away from it just because Mike Evans is always one of those guys that you're just so unsure of.
I like Evans if you have a quarterback. They've got Baker freaking Mayfield and Kyle Trask. And supposedly Tom Brady, according to Cap Friendly.
Wait, what?
Like, if he's still there.
Oh, if he's there, well, I'm going to pick him next time right now. But we also just talked about aging wide receivers. Mike Evans isn't dealing with the injury that Cooper Kupp is, but he's also 31 years old. So how are you going to worry about that one? All right, one more I wanted to get to before we get to our Ask Us Anything segment on the other side. We just did our previous segment, who would you rather be, the Mets or the Cardinals? Pretty obvious we'd all want to be the Cardinals in this situation. Who would you rather be going into the season, the Cowboys or the 49ers?
Looking at them long term.
Yeah, long-term success. I'm not talking about like going into this year. Let's go 5-year window right now.
To me, I would much rather be the Cowboys.
Agreed.
I understand that the 49ers have great weapons. The defense is great. But I don't have as much faith in Brock Purdy as everybody else. I know he was great last year, but for whatever reason, I just feel like this is going to be a step back for Brock Purdy, and I think San Francisco cannot continue to get away with the always, okay, we're going to kind of rotate our quarterbacks here. Okay, we drafted Trey Lance and missed on that, but somehow we hit on Trey Lance as Mr. Irrelevant. I think when you look at the Cowboys, now look, they got to get Dak locked up on a new contract. That's going to be step number one. But you got Dak, you got CeeDee Lamb, you got Brandon Cooks there. He's more of the 1 or 2 years at the beginning of this. Got a great offensive line. They've got great defensive pieces. They're just now entering this kind of winning window. I don't know if San Francisco, really good team. I don't think Brock Purdy can take them to the next level, though.
No, I don't think so either. I think the one thing that San Francisco has going for them is their head coach, because the Cowboys have McCarthy. But you can change your head coach if you still have got the better pieces. And although a lot of people would say San Francisco's got the better defense now, I think if we're going long term, the Cowboys are going to have the better defense. I think they've got the better pieces in Parsons and Diggs. Of course, San Francisco's got Bosa and a couple of others that are just studs. And then with the offense, you mentioned it, like having CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard and that tight end that they drafted, that Jake Ferguson, with one of the best offensive lines in the game, you're set up for long-term success. So I'd much rather be the Cowboys as long as you get yourself a adequate head coach beyond this season.
Yeah, and I think that is a fair point. I think the head coach is something to keep an eye on in Dallas, because I think if they underperform this year, one, I think McCarthy's out the door, and if Belichick becomes a free agent, if New England decides to move on from him from what I expect to be a really bad year there, they're going to be a team to keep an eye on in the Belichick sweepstakes. But I just love their weapons, and I think Dak's a quarterback that I think he's definitely top 10. Brock Purdy, I don't know if I can say that, because I think Brock Purdy's more of a guy that benefits from the system than is a playmaker like what Dak Prescott is.
See, I think I would rather be San Francisco because actually I was listening to when Michelle Smallman was on the Fast Lane last week talking about the Cowboys and how they have a ton of free agents coming up. Like they're going to have to really do some work in giving players new contracts, and you just never really know. I feel like Dallas is such a volatile franchise. Like they have that Toronto Maple Leafs feel to them. Whereas the 49ers, I feel like they're just always in it. And really, they're one piece away. And it's a big piece because it's the quarterback position. But they are just really that one piece away from pushing them over the edge.
But I feel like we've said that every year when it was, oh, well, they got Jimmy Garoppolo, but they're still missing one piece. And then it was, oh, well, they've got Trey Lance coming, and then he wasn't the guy. And now it's Brock Purdy, and, oh, well, is he the guy? Like, I feel like it's a rotating door of like, oh, we're just one piece away, but we got to hope we hit on the quarterback.
Sure.
And you've never been able to.
I guess the way I look at it is I think it would be more likely that the 49ers will hit on a quarterback eventually within the next 5 years, if you look at it that way, rather than Dallas being able to contain what they have right now with all of their free agents coming up.
Yeah. Graham Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario, 314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. Also, you can head over to our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Send us your questions because Ask Us Anything is next on 101 ESPN. Three 314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. Also, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Just click on that BK and Ferrario live stream alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. It is time for Ask Us Anything, where you send us any questions you want, and we'll have to answer them between now and the top of the hour. So send them over to us, 314-399-9646. I like this one. We'll start it off with this. 636. Guys, how many fantasy football leagues are you in, and how many is too many? So I'm in 2. I've done 3, and I think 3 would be my max. I don't think I could do more than 3. That's just way too much trying to stay on top of multiple waiver wires and trying to figure out. It excites you during the football season, but when it's football season, it's also hockey season for me, and so life gets a little crazier, so it's hard to stay on top of all of that.
I'm trying to think if I have ever done more than 3. I think 3 is probably the most that I've topped out at. And honestly, I enjoy doing 2, and that's how many I'm in now. The 101 ESPN league that I'm in, one with a couple of buddies of mine from college. So I would say 2 is probably the number that I prefer. I've done 3. I could do 3, but 2 is probably the max for me. But I'll do a lot of like daily fantasy. That's not as hard to keep track of.
Right.
But I think 2 is probably the max for this guy.
Yeah, I've only done 2 in the past. This year I'm only doing 1. I'm only doing ours.
Really?
Yeah, I found last.
Tanner wants you out of ours.
Yeah, true. Maybe I'll do 0 once it's all said and done.
Tanner's okay. Hey, if you're out, can I have a couple of your pieces?
Yeah. What do you got on that team again?
According to Yahoo, you might not want any of my pieces. So.
Well, I was just tired of all the complaining. I had to hear the morning show complain about how they didn't know it was a super flex, even though everybody was told.
Tanner and I complained the entire day prior to the draft because we didn't want 2 more people in.
That one was definitely reasonable.
It was justified, wasn't it? I had a buddy who did 5 of them, and I don't know how the hell he did that. Like, the man had a full-time job, he had a family, and he did 5 fantasy football leagues.
But here's the problem for that. If you have that many leagues, who do you root for? Like, what players do you root for?
Oh, see, I don't care. Like, to me, that excites me because I don't have a designated football team. So when I have that many, like if I had that many, that would make Sundays more exciting because then I'm watching everything.
I'd rather be able to root for some players or root against others. I wouldn't want to, my player just scored a touchdown. Oh, damn. I just got scored against in my other league. Like, that's annoying to me.
Someone said they're in 8 fantasy football leagues. God bless you, sir, madam, because that is a lot.
The warrior.
From the 618 for Ask Us Anything, 314-399-9646. Do you think the Mets sold Scherzer and Verlander so that they can open up room for Ohtani? It would make sense. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Selling them because you're trying to get below that luxury tax. You don't have to pay it.
Well, I don't think they're getting below the luxury tax. Now, they probably got underneath, like, the Cohen tax, but they had too much money on the books that I don't think
stuck there.
It's not like the Angels where they clearly putting all those guys on waivers definitely got under the luxury tax.
Think if they had Scherzer and Verlander, the team was successful. I still believe they probably would have gone out there to go after Shohei Ohtani. I mean, right? Like, Cohen has made it very clear he doesn't care. He'll throw whatever he needs to. And why wouldn't you? If Scherzer and Verlander were pitching well, you still would have gone after Ohtani.
Yeah, I think if they were winning it, they would have done it. I don't think they're going to be in hot pursuit of Shohei Ohtani.
If his injury didn't happen, do you think they would have?
No. I think they're going to be still a dark horse. They're going to be involved, but I don't think they sold Scherzer and Verlander in hopes of getting Ohtani because they're less competitive now than they were when they had those guys. And what does Ohtani want to do? He wants to win. I think the selling of Scherzer and Verlander was Cohen realizing I can't buy a championship. I do need to supplement the team with good prospects and young talent, but I can't just spend money on the team. And their farm system was so heavily depleted. That's why he basically paid for 2 top-end prospects at the trade deadline.
His younger brother.
So I don't think that they're going to be – I don't think they're going to be significant players in free agency. I think they're going to target maybe Yamamoto, and that'll be like their top-end pitching piece that they target. But I don't think they're going to be as aggressive as some people think compared to like Cohen standards. They're still probably going to be aggressive, but it won't be, let's go get Ohtani, let's go get Aaron Nola, let's go get Blake Snell. No, I don't think they're going to be doing that because I think Cohen realizes they've got to reset their farm system before they can actually start spending on significant pieces again.
How much does his market drop now with this injury? Because, like, to me, it was the same teams that would be checking in on it, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Giants. And then Seattle, we've heard they're going to probably throw everything they can to get him there. Does that market change at all, though?
I don't think so.
It's like Baltimore. I don't think Baltimore spends the money on him if they thought they could before.
Boston doesn't do it. Boston's ownership.
Boston does. The Yankees aren't going to do it.
Yankees are trying to kind of reset, so I don't think they're out. I think it comes down to
Giants and Mariners.
I think so. I think
Cubs?
he's going back. I think there's a chance he goes back to the Angels. I think Cubs are a dark horse, but like assessing his market's going to be really tough because it depends on if he wants to pitch again. Does he get Tommy John? There's a great piece by Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic today. Why has he not elected Tommy John surgery yet? Why is he still in the lineup? Maybe because he's going to try everything to avoid going back under the knife for the second time.
Yeah.
But I don't think his market in terms of like his value changes significantly. But all the teams that were still in there are going to be the same teams that were interested before.
From the 636 for Ask Us Anything, guys, after hearing JR's interview with Colton Parayko, how much do you think Parayko will improve from last season? I mean, look, he can't be as worse or bad as he was last season. That's the best way I go about it, because he was bad last year. The second half of last season should have given people a little insight into how Parayko was actually playing. I don't know what the Mike Weber effect is going to look like with him. I will say this. Maybe this is me reading too much into it, because I do enjoy me some Colton Parayko. Kyrou posted a picture of them on Instagram yesterday working out. My man looks jacked. Like, Colton Parayko looks like he's slimmed down. He's put on muscle. I don't think that turns him into this, this bull behind the net that's going to start cross-checking people in the face. But what I do think is if he's slimmed down and put on more muscle, the focus on Colton Parayko is going to be being tougher to play against in front of the net. And if that's the case, Colton Parayko is a different player and a better player.
He did. That picture that you showed me, he looked like a giant. Did you ever play Pokemon Go?
No.
What?
He looked like
My Pokemon's Game Boy
that
Pokemon.
Seems random.
Very random.
His arms look like a Machamp. That's what it reminded me of.
I get that reference. T-Bone doesn't get that reference, but how did you not get that reference and he gets that reference?
Well,
He's younger than you. Oh, you were too cool
He's
for
not
Pokemon?
younger than me. I'm younger than Grant.
Oh, my God.
I think.
Yeah.
But I love how you guys are falling for the classic. He's in the best shape of his life
I'm not
by
even
seeing a photo.
It's not even the best shape of his life. I'm telling you, that man's biceps, they've never been that big.
No, it was insane. It was a big difference.
The man looks like Thor.
Drooling
Minus
over
the hair. He looks like Ivan Drago from Rocky IV.
I didn't get that. Well,
yeah, you did.
No,
you know that reference.
I'd see it. I know it if I saw it.
Literally the only comp to Colton Parayko is face to face.
But to the question of can he have a bounce back year? I think he can, but I'm not as optimistic about it as Alex and Grant are in this room. I think what you saw from the defense last year is kind of what I'm expecting this year. I think you're going to see some marginal improvements. Like, yes, I do think Parayko will have a better year, but I'm not sure it's going to be good enough to where it is, oh, wow, he's become a shutdown defenseman, and Luddy is going to have to play up to Parayko's level for them to have a shutdown pairing. And that's where my concern stems from the St. Louis Blues.
Midway through the season, this is one of my bold predictions, Leddy's not playing with Parayko. Midway through the season.
We traded him?
No.
Oh.
Wish. Midway through the season, it's one of Scandella, Tucker, or Perunovic. I think Leddy's on your third pair by the middle of the season, because Krug and Falk will be playing together.
I don't know if it'll be Perunovic, though. It is interesting because I know Army had mentioned that before on our show 2 years ago.
Yeah. It's going to be tough to be Perunovic because Parayko's going to be in the shutdown role.
Yeah.
And Perunovic, I don't think, can be a shutdown role.
Scandella, I could see, though.
Scandella, I could see. If he's healthy, I can see him starting the season. I think Leddy's going to be a third-pair defenseman this season for them.
Well, and I don't really see Perunovic up with Parayko, just because if you're trying to give Parayko the best chance to sort of solidify his role, I don't think it's with somebody like Perunovic, who he hasn't really gotten his feet wet too much yet. But T-Bone, I think your outlook is fair. Just based off of how it went last year, it's fair to look at what the Blues have on defense right now and be like, nothing's different, so why should I expect things to be different? But I do think there's something to the fact that these players are going to be pissed off after last season and what happened and how they're viewed and just how the season went. And I don't see them being complacent with how things went last season. I think it'll be different going into this season.
Just to that point, because I hear that a lot of, these guys are going to be angry the way they performed and they're going to bounce back. I guess my only retort to that would be, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. I think you are spot on with that. My only retort that would be, why couldn't they have done that in season last year? Why was there not a in-season adjustment then of, man, I'm getting criticized because our defense is bad. I'm PO'd and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to show everybody wrong. What happened to
Because
that?
I think you probably trust the process in season of, it'll figure it out if I just stick to what I'm doing.
Even if you can tell the process clearly not working.
I mean, if you read Parayko's quotes with JR, he even said it. He's like, I kept going home every night questioning, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing the same thing and I just keep working on it. I think the other portion of that too is the same thing we're seeing with the Cardinals. When you're out of it, you're out of it. And by November last year, Blues knew they were out of it. There was hope, and then there wasn't hope. Blues knew they were done. And I think when you're out of it, you're just okay, we need to move on, which is part of the reason why I think they moved on from Mike Van Ryn. A team that was depleted, didn't figure it out in the middle of the season, and they said, we got to get a new voice. And I'm with you. I mean, if you're pissed off, why aren't you fixing it in the middle of the season but those would be my reasons why. And we'll find out if they're actual reasons or if it's just the same person that just keeps coming up with excuses once we hit this season. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we saw the importance of Tommy Edman in the past 2 Cardinals games. What is the importance of Tommy Edman next season for the Cardinals? We'll discuss that next on 101 ESPN.
Driven to right. Well hit. Tatis back. It is gone. It is gone. The Cardinals have won it.
Tommy Edman with back-to-back walk-off winners for the Cardinals over the last couple of days. What does that mean for 2024? Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario and BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We're live on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. And as always, you can text us on the Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. So this has been the debate that we've had over the last couple of months, you, me, and BK T-Bone, of, how do they figure out these infielders? What's going to be the role when you have Brendan Donovan and Tommy Edman and Nolan Gorman? How does that fit into 2024? Well, Katie Wu asked that question also on her piece on The Athletic talking about Tommy Edman. This is from her piece. But St. Louis will be using its final 28 games to start planning for 2024. And Edman figures to be a central figure. Manager Ali Marmol, he's extremely important to the core of our group. One, the versatility is amazing. 2, he's a student of the game, and you want a lot of those guys, the ones that are just into the numbers of the game. Cardinals fans aren't going to like that. The small details of it. He studies the base running side, the defensive side. He's just really into the competition. He's a big part of what we're doing. So all of that you hear, and you wonder, okay, Tommy Edman's got to be a part of this team in 2024. The question is how. And T-Bone, me personally, I don't see a problem of Tommy Edman being a bench bat who you use everywhere that you need him to be. Look, the offense has not been good like it's been in the past. He's still hitting close to 250s, 241 batting average with a 712 OPS. His OPS plus is 6 points under league average. But he gives you pop. He gives you speed. And against lefties, if I'm remembering his splits correctly, he hits really well. And the defense in center field is above average for you. And the defense at shortstop and the defense at second base, the man's won a Gold Glove at second base. That player plays into your plans in 2024, unless a team is willing to give you a lot for him. And that's where I think the Cardinals' stance should be. You want players like this, but if somebody else wants them more than you, then you got to be willing to move on from them.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to know what they decided to do with Tommy Edman. And the reason I say that is because I think he's going to be the center fielder going into 2024 or 2024. I think their plan is for him to be the everyday center fielder. And look, he's been great in terms of his jump and in terms of his route running out in center field. I mean, he's a +4 in center field and outs above average according to Fangraphs. But the one thing that I have a concern with Edman is his arm out in center field. And look, I think the Cardinals push back on that notion that you don't necessarily need an arm if you can cut down on some of those plays that I was just talking about. I disagree with that because I do think teams can start to take advantage of Tommy Edman in center field. And I wonder if they look into a platoon potentially with him in center against lefties, and maybe you have him on the bench for Rise that comes into games late, and then against a right-hander you can go Newbar in center with Donovan in left, and you DH like Burleson or someone like that. I think that's how they can best utilize the lineup. But I think Tommy Edman's going to be a guy that's going to be a part of this team in 2024. I don't know if they're going to get enough in trade value for what Tommy Edman could bring to them next year. Because you look at Edman, we just mentioned the defense in center field. But we also got to bring up the caveat of, okay, what if Mason Wynn continues to really struggle offensively? Will his defense be enough to keep him in the lineup? I think it will.
I think it is too.
But I think it's fair to raise the question of, okay, but what if it doesn't? What if what if he's so bad offensively they need to send him down? Like it's Paul DeYoung offense. Do you send him down, and then do you play Tommy Edman at shortstop? Like, those are the kind of conversations they have to be having internally right now of Tommy Edman, probably our everyday center fielder going into 2024. But if in a pinch we need him to play shortstop, we've got that. If Wynn deals with injuries or he really struggles, or he can play second base, that's why I just think he's going to be so valuable to them that I don't think you're looking to move him this offseason.
Well, and see, I don't believe he's going to be the starting center fielder. I think that's going to be Newbar, and then I think Donovan's your left fielder, unless Tyler O'Neill is available, and they don't move him. And then Tommy Edman becomes that super utility piece, because I believe they want Brendan Donovan's bat in the lineup every single day. And if you've got Edman in center field, Newbar's going to be in left, Walker's in right, then you're probably DH obviously is there, but what's the deal with Contreras and whatnot? But the reason I'm with you in terms of he needs to be on this roster is, if not Wynn, then who? Because I just look at Mason Wynn, kind of, you're trending towards the Yachty side of it, where it's like, man, his defense is just so elite that I don't care how he hits. I put him 9th, I put him 8th, and I just know I'm going to get Gold Glove defense next year. But if he does struggle, because you do have to take that into consideration, or if an injury pops up, who's your shortstop? Because, I mean, it's not going to be Taylor Motter, or at least I hope it's not going to be Taylor Motter.
Yeah, the only guy that would, the least Donovan. The way I'm thinking is you would either turn to Donovan or what's his name, Prito in AAA. Maybe he's ready to go.
JC, because he could do infield.
But you're right too. To that point, if there's an injury, who would you prefer to be your backup shortstop?
You want Tommy
Edman.
And especially if it's long term. And that's where it comes into Tommy Edman. Now, again, I'm not going to grasp onto Tommy Edman and say, through my cold, dead hands, you can have him. If somebody's willing to give me something that's worth and makes me feel like I'm better next season and completes one of those tasks that I have to get done, then I have to seriously consider it. Because as much as I love the winning mentality of Tommy Edman and his versatility, I have those guys. I have a Brendan Donovan who can also do that. I have this JC if I'm not moving him, which sounds like he's a super utility guy. You've got those pieces. But I also tend to look at it as you're not going to get that value. So for Tommy Edman to be a part of it, yeah, that makes sense for this team. It's just a matter of where he's at. And frankly, I don't care because somebody texted in and said he's hitting 241. That's not good for you, Ferrario?
You forgot the part, bro.
Bro, yeah, he did call me bro. No, it's fine, but that's not what he's typically at. He's typically like 260, 270 batting average type of guy. And Brendan Donovan, when healthy, is better than that. So Brendan Donovan is in my lineup. And then find me somebody else who you're going to take out so that 240 can sit in your lineup. But Tommy Edman on your bench, and we just saw his clutchness, is a good thing for this Cardinals team.
Look, I still think that they should at least explore the idea of a reunion with a Harrison Bader or target a Kevin Kiermaier that could go be plugged into center field, play that above-average defense, and not just play above-average defense, but also have the arm. But because they have so many other needs and are going to have to throw so much money at the rotation and potentially so much money at the bullpen, I can understand where they say, you know, we have to get through a year with Tommy Edman at center field. And, like, I think it is okay to do that because whatever they do in center field next year is more or less a stopgap situation, kind of like it was really the last 2 years with Paul DeJong at shortstop. Yes, Paul DeJong was terrible in 2021, and he was good at his time here in St. Louis this year. But he was the stopgap till Mason Wynn was ready. They believe they've got the center fielder of the future down in Double-A who stole like his 93rd bag or something crazy the other day.
It's ridiculous.
In Victor Scott. So can they get away with 1 year in center field where maybe they don't have a guy that's got an arm but is 4 outs above average in Tommy Edman? Yeah, I think you can. I think there is the argument to be made there because I think they're looking to just have a stopgap solution in center field until Victor Scott is ready to come up to the big leagues.
So speaking of the outfield, which that's mainly what we've been talking about because it seems like that's where Tommy Edman's going to play, has your opinion changed on it all, T-Bone? Because Jordan Walker has looked significantly better than what he looked at the beginning of the season. There's no argument there. Lars Nootbaar is expected to be activated. Is it today? Or is it after this series?
It's possibly
part
today.
of the September call-ups, essentially, is what that's going to be. Nootbaar gets activated. He's going to be back out there. And then, like we talked about, you're going to see Tommy Edman. You're going to see Tyler O'Neill. You're going to see Dylan Carlson if he gets healthy again. But the two mainstays have been Nootbaar and Walker, and then you insert Edman. The fact that it's improving defensively, is it giving you more confidence for next season? Because Walker's improvement, you know what Nootbaar is, and then if Tommy Edman's that third piece, that might be your outfield for you next season. And that, at least from what we've seen over the last month, 2 months, is better than what it was at the start of the season.
Yeah, I do feel somewhat more confident in the outfield defense going into next year because, though, again, I still question Edman's arm in center. He's been great in terms of routes, and again, +4 and outs above average. I think what's going to be interesting is left field if they keep Tyler O'Neill, which I don't expect, but he's been good defensively. Nootbaar's great defensively in the corners. I think he's a little below average in center. And I think the number one thing that's kind of changing my mind is the defense from Jordan Walker because he does look better. I saw this today in the Post-Dispatch. Jordan Walker, who is new into the outfield this year, he's improved from a -13 defensive runs saved in right to a -9 as of this week. So he's slowly getting better, and I think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing him feel more comfortable in his routes, getting better jumps on the ball. We've seen the cannon of an arm. Can he get himself closer to average in right field next year? And he's the biggest question mark. I believe he will because I think he's a smart and I think he's a great baseball player, and we've seen that at the plate. We've seen him make adjustments there. I've seen him working when we go down to the ballpark with Willie McGee and working on his outfield defense in right field. So I do think he can get to that. And if he can get to league average, and you've got Edman in center and Nootbaar / Donovan / whoever is the left fielder, I think you could have a solid defense. And if you just add some swing and miss to your staff, I think you're not going to really have to worry about it. I think you'll be fine in the outfield.
I think you've got speed out there. Depending on what your center field looks like, we know that Jordan Walker and both Lars Nootbaar have the wheels for it. I think you've got the arm specifically in Jordan Walker. Lars Nootbaar's got one as well. It just comes down to the responsibility in terms of defense, and that's really where all eyes go to Jordan Walker. But again, how much is he out there? Do you use him more in the DH spot? But the more he's out there, does he improve more? And I mean, he has improved this season. What is it? It's defensive run saves. He's a -7 now, but he was a -13. So you're seeing improvement. Now, is it the improvement that turns you into a contender next season? That remains to be seen. But that's also why you advocate, and which I understand advocating for, going after some type of defensive-minded center field so that you can take the pressure off of both Walker and Nootbaar.
Yeah, well,
and Edman, so that you could use him in that utility role.
I just think you're better off with a center fielder that's got an arm as well as range, and that's why I advocate for it. I think they're going to keep Nootbaar in a corner. I think Nootbaar's better in a corner than he is in center
I think he's
field.
better for you in left field.
I don't think they have a above-average center fielder on this roster.
No.
And some people would argue and say, well, Tommy Edman's that. I can't put him at an above-average center fielder because of his arm.
Tommy takes the right routes. Tommy's got the right speed, but his arm concerns me because, like you said, you will get challenged more, especially on sac flies with the runner at third base, and I don't know if Tommy Edman's making those plays. Whereas, like Harrison Bader, people doubted running on him. And that's what you need in center field, especially against this Cardinals team if you're going to be putting runs in scoring position. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, college football weekend look ahead. We're going to whip around college football and answer some of the questions next on 101 ESPN. Time for our college football weekend look ahead as we officially enter the first weekend of college football action. We'll make our pick'ems in the 1 o'clock hour. No, these don't count for our punishments. That will start, 2 weeks? Next week. So when I'm out, I'll have to call in and we'll do that. But that'll start. We've got new rules and we've got new punishments for this upcoming season. And they're going to be a doozy. I got one that I'm really excited about.
Are you actually going to do them on time this year?
Yes, because I guess I don't want to spoil the farm, but we're eliminating them, doing them every punishment, and we're making them bigger
and badder on a monthly basis. Rather than last year where it was every week.
And all of these will be done in studio where people can witness either the pain or embarrassment.
To be fair, I blame BK for the lack of time because he lost a lot, so it became very tough to...
There was only one that we didn't do, and it was the paintball gun, which the paintballs...
that was your fault.
It was my fault, but look, it was also a mechanical issue, but everything else was BK's fault. But we'll explain that later once we get to a pick'em. But let's start with some college football weekend look-aheads. Let's start with T-Bones fighting Illini. What are you expecting, buddy? After Mizzou did their job, I'm expecting Illinois to start off 0-1.
I don't think they're going to lose. I think they will beat Toledo. Now, I think this is a much better game than what we saw from Mizzou last night because it was basically a preseason game. Toledo's really good. They're going to be one of the top teams in the MAC. I'm fascinated to see what Illinois looks like because question of what Luke Altmaier is going to look like at quarterback, the transfer from Ole Miss. So I'm fascinated to see him, see how they replace the production from Chase Brown last year. I think they're going to look to throw the ball a little bit more. I think it's going to look kind of similar to the Missouri offense. Get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly and allow your playmakers to make something happen in space. And we'll see what the defense looks like. The secondary is going to be the biggest question for the Illini coming into the year. How do you replace Witherspoon's production and Sidney Brown, who was at middle linebacker / safety for them last year? I'm fascinated to know what they look like. I do think they win, but I think it's going to be a lot closer, and it's going to be kind of edge-of-your-seat football because I think they don't cover the 9.5-point spread.
Is their identity going to be defense again? Because that's what I'm most interested in. Like, that team last year you knew it was going to be a fight for whoever wanted to come out with a victory against Illinois, and because you lost so many weapons, I don't know if you have that same prowess. Is that fair?
I think so. I still think the defense is going to be really good. Now, it won't be to the level of last year because last year's defense was just incredible. I think the defense will be good, take a slightly step back. I think the offense actually takes a step forward because I'm actually excited about Altmaier. I think he can hopefully open up the passing game a little bit more, and nothing against the legend Tommy DeVito, but he was very limited in what he could do. He couldn't take shots down the field. I'm hoping Altmaier can at least open up the passing game.
Someone was very upset with you about speaking ill of Tommy DeVito earlier.
I wasn't speaking ill of him. It was just, you knew they had no deep ball threat with Tommy DeVito.
Poor Tommy D. Poor Tommy D. Let's just get this one out of the way. Mizzou and Illinois finished the season with what record? We talked about Mizzou earlier. Both of us are on board with them being an 8-win team. Where are you at with Illinois?
I agree. I think Mizzou wins 8. I'm actually feeling a little bit better about Illinois because of what I saw from Wisconsin from Nebraska and
that conference is
Minnesota
just
yesterday.
Dismal.
Yeah,
You think 9?
I don't know if I'd go that far because I think they're going to lose to Penn State. I think they might lose to Kansas. I'm feeling worse and worse about
Kansas
that game.
is in action tonight. You get a good look at them.
Yeah. I think they win 8. I think they have a misstep somewhere.
Both with 8.
Somewhere between Purdue, Maryland, Nebraska, Minnesota, all toss-up games, along with Wisconsin and Iowa. I think they maybe lose 2 or 3 of those, so I think they're an 8-win team just like Mizzou.
All right, let's do this one. Best game this weekend, not the Florida State-LSU game, because, of course, that's going to be everybody's pick because it's both ranked teams.
So the one that I think is another kind of obvious that I'm going to throw out here is South Carolina, North Carolina. That game's going to be great. North Carolina favored by 2.5. The one that I'm actually really looking forward to, and I think it's kind of a sneaky under-the-radar game, is Washington-Boise State. Boise State, always a great non-Power 5 team. Got Washington that's at number 10. They're exciting to watch in the Pac-12 because they've got Penix, who had a great year. I'm fascinated to see that game. I know BK was ripping on Colorado. I'm excited to see what Colorado looks like.
That's my exciting one. I want to see the national runner-up with TCU and with the pieces that they lost. But what do they look like against Deion Sanders' team? Because I'm not expecting much from that team because, I mean, let's be honest, it's the first year and it's going to be rough. But how do they look against a ranked opponent? I like the fact that they start off against TCU because TCU's got questions, Colorado's got questions. That's the one that I'm most excited for, and that's a Saturday afternoon one, which is perfect. Grant, do you have one that you're pumped up for?
The two that you were talking about with Boise State and then with that one, those two interest me just because I always try to look for the bets where the odds are just like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And I had one time a couple years ago where I hit on one. I had like a $2 bet and won $2,700. The upsets are always out there in college football.
Look at Grant just flaunting that money over there. I like that.
Oh, that was years ago. I haven't hit one like that since.
I knew Grant was loaded.
That's why he and I are good boys. We're boys.
That money disappeared on FanDuel somehow.
That's typically how that goes.
But those two games, just with Deion Sanders at Colorado, I'm interested to see how that goes too. So those two games, when it comes from a betting standpoint, those are two that I would dabble in a little bit.
So speaking of betting, who's on upset watch? Because the game that you mentioned, North Carolina, South Carolina, I'm putting North Carolina on upset watch. I think North Carolina had 6 or 7 one-score wins last year. And although they're returning a lot of their players, Spencer Rattler's on the other side. And I know you don't like Spencer Rattler, T-Bone.
Oh, I didn't like when he was at Oklahoma. I thought he was really good last year.
I think he is going to be able to exploit that North Carolina team, and I think I would put North Carolina on upset watch. And what you say was a 2.5-point spread?
Yeah.
I like that. I think South Carolina can cover that.
Yeah, not a big spread. I think that Washington could be on upset watch, but I do think they ultimately win. I may surprise a lot of people because I'm putting Oregon State on upset watch.
Oh, really?
18. They're taking on San Jose State, who just lost to USC. I'm not buying into DJ Uiagalelei as the starting quarterback at Oregon State.
Oh, you just hate Uwe.
He was Huey at Clemson. That's right. So I'm putting Oregon State on upset watch. They're favored by 16.5. I think there's a chance San Jose State could upset them. Keep an eye on Duke, too. They're kind of a sleeper on Clemson. Duke's got a quarterback that could be going in the NFL draft. Keep an eye on that Clemson game.
Both those teams, too, at home. And I love betting on home teams in college football because I don't think there's a sport where there's a better home field advantage than in college football, especially in week 1.
All right, who are you most curious about? Because I've got two teams. One's got the slight edge, Ohio State and Clemson. And you said earlier this week that you believe Clemson is a dark horse to make the playoffs, T-Bone.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I really am curious what Ohio State looks like now that C.J. Stroud's gone. And what are they ranked? They're 4 going into this season. I'm not so sure they're the 4th best team. And we'll find out. That's why I'm most curious to see, because it's dictated on their quarterback play. And if he's not as good, you're talking about a team that dips a little bit that might fall out of a playoff conversation.
Yeah, I think someone that I'm interested to see kind of player-wise. I mean, I'm fascinated by the quarterbacks in the Pac-12, and DJ Uiagalelei falls into this with Oregon State. How about Tennessee? Having to replace Hendon Hooker. I'm fascinated to know what they look like because I think they're one of those teams, at least for me, that coming into the year that I'm not as high on. I think Tennessee is not a top 25 team by the end of the year. That's how low I am on them. So I'm fascinated to see what they look like. First game without Hendon Hooker. And how about the quarterbacks that we're going to see? Because not only does Ohio State have to replace C.J. Stroud.
It's McCord with them?
That sounds right. I can't remember off the top of my head. But you've also got Georgia that's got to replace Stetson Bennett. What's Alabama look like replacing Bryce Young? Like, a lot of these top-tier programs, these powerhouses, have to go into the year with new faces at the most critical position in college football.
So who are the 4 teams that make the playoffs? Or not 4 teams, 6 teams that make the playoffs?
The 4 college football playoff teams?
4 college football playoff teams.
I think you're going to see, though I just said, I'm fascinated to see what Georgia's QB situation looks like. They're loaded.
Georgia.
I think Georgia.
Alabama.
They're a lock, I think. Georgia.
I don't think Alabama gets
about Alabama.
Really?
That was going to be my team that I was going to say is most intriguing to me.
Really?
Just because they just named Jalen Milroe their quarterback today.
Still think they get in.
But how often have you seen Alabama name a quarterback the day before their season starts? Like, they always know.
Yeah.
There's not really a competition there. So that tells me that they aren't super high on one of their quarterbacks, and it's a little bit concerning for them going into the season. They're a team that always seems to figure it out, but it is an interesting start.
Is Michigan a team that gets in?
I think they
I
get
think
in.
they will.
I think they get in.
Yeah.
And then it comes down to, for me, Clemson or Ohio State, one of those two.
Yeah, so I've got two teams that aren't in the top 4 getting in right now. I think Alabama, LSU are going to be fascinating to see. Ohio State's going to be there. I don't trust USC. You got to have a defense to be a team that's going to get to the college football
love their
playoff,
quarterback.
especially in the Pac-12.
I love their quarterback. I think he's winning the Heisman, but I'm with you. They're two. I don't trust them enough to be one of the top 4 teams.
I like Clemson because I like their quarterback situation now that Huey's gone. And after watching Notre Dame against Navy, and I get it was Navy, they've got the quarterback now.
They're my
I've got
dark
Notre
horse.
Dame as getting in that 4 spot. So
They're-
I've got Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, Notre Dame as my college football playoff teams.
I got Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, and then my dark horse was Notre Dame because I think Notre Dame is a
Interesting.
playoff team because of that quarterback that we talked about on, Monday?
Hartman is a difference
looks like a
maker for
stud.
Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Now, and they've got the schedule to do it this year, too. They play Clemson, which now that I think about that could be problematic, but Clemson's going to get an extra game in the ACC championship game. They've also got USC, and they've got, I believe it's Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
By the way, that TCU Colorado game that we said we were excited for, you can hear that here on 101 ESPN tomorrow, pregame starting at 10:30. So make sure you're locked into that. And then Sunday we've got some games as well, including the Florida State and LSU game, with that kickoff being at 6:30. So make sure you're tuned into 101 ESPN. You're home for college football action, T-Bone.
Best time of the year.
Amen to that, brother. 2 weeks from now will be the best time of the year once hockey training camp gets underway. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Again, we'll hit our college football pick'em coming up in the next hour. But coming up next, we are officially in the final month of the season for the Cardinals with no playoffs expected. What are you hoping to learn from certain players? We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, Mizzou took down South Dakota 35-10. They get their season started off on the right foot. Brady Cook went 17 for 21, 172 yards and a touchdown as Mizzou starts 1-0. Tonight, the Cardinals are back in action as they host the Pirates to start a 3-game set. Dakota Hudson will get the first of that set for the Cardinals. Mitch Keller for the Pirates, who's 11-8 on the season with the 4.01 ERA. First pitch will be at 7:15, and then tomorrow night, City SC back in action over in Kansas City. Kansas City 7-11-8 on the season, fourth worst in the Western Conference. St. Louis best in the Western Conference at 15-9-2. Earlier this season, St. Louis already took down Kansas City 4-0 here in St. Louis. The rematch is tomorrow in KC at 7:30. I'm Grant France. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
We are officially into September, and typically, as Cardinals fans, we're getting excited for playoffs. You know, the colder weather. You're like, oh, October baseball is here. Well, October baseball will be here, and it will be like 2 days, and then you'll go into the season, and then we'll be talking about the offseason in hopes that the Cardinals do something. But anyway, there's still areas to focus in on in this final month of the season for this Cardinals team.
Like, who is going to win the NL Central?
Who is going to be in the bullpen next year, right? Can Suarez prove to be an option for them next season? Can Casey Lawrence be the long man, T-Bone? These are the questions that everyone wants answers to.
All right, let's actually get to the nitty-gritty because I don't want to talk about those guys.
Why not, man? Okay, seriously, though, the first question that I would like to see from now until the end of the season is the starting pitching minutia. And I think you'll figure that out because you're going to get about 5 more starts, maybe 4 more starts from some of these guys. And it really comes down to 2 of them, Thompson and Dakota Hudson. Don't care about anybody else. Matthew Liberatore, when he gets back and he's healthy, fine. To me, I think you're either starting next year in AAA or you're going to be a bullpen arm. But Thompson and Dakota Hudson, where do you two fall? Because it seems, and it makes sense, that if they can't sign 3 free agent starting pitchers, it seems that the Cardinals would be more inclined to give that job to Dakota Hudson for how he's performed compared to Zach Thompson, but Zach Thompson's got the swing and miss. So that's if there was like the ultimate number 1 for me, those 2 guys I'd like to see in these 4 or 5 more starts to clear that minutia, and I know exactly what's happening in the offseason.
Yeah, some guys that I'm going to keep an eye on as we get into the final month here. I'm excited to see what Zach Thompson looks like in the final month because he's been great ever since he got pushed into the rotation, and I think they're still trying to figure out what exactly his role is next year because I don't think they're going into the year planning on him being a starter. Same with Dakota Hudson in terms of in the 5-man rotation for 2024 when the season starts, unless there's someone that they sign or a Michaelis or Matz gets injured in spring training. But I'm fascinated to know how they look at him and they say, okay, he's really good as a starter. We think that's his long-term plan. It's best for him to go down to AAA and be the number 1 guy in AAA. Yeah. So when we do have an injury or we do need a spot start, we call up Zach Thompson, and he takes the role that Matthew Liberatore's had really the last kind of 2 or year and a half, I would say, where he's been that quote-unquote number 6 guy. Or do you make him a swingman for you to where maybe he goes into the bullpen and like the name that I threw out today was like Jacob Junis of the Giants. Is he that guy where he's like, maybe he's a reliever that's a long man that goes 3 innings, or maybe he's a spot starter that goes 3 innings. I'm fascinated to know what they determine with Zach Thompson down the stretch. I'm also excited to continue to see some of those young arms like Drew Rom. I was wrong. I'll admit it. I didn't think he had major league stuff, and then he went out and shoved against the Phillies, a really good lineup. So I'm fascinated to see what the Rominator looks like as we get going.
CD?
What?
I forgot you still don't know what a CD-ROM is.
Don't ruin my groove.
Google it for a minute.
Some other guys, though, to just keep an eye. I want to see Palacios get more playing time. I'm fascinated by Richie Palacios. He reminds me, and I said this when they played in the Pirates series where he had the great series against his brother. He reminds me a little bit of John Jay. I don't think he'll be as good as John Jay, but slap left-handed hitter, plays really good defense out in center field. So I'm excited to see what he looks like the rest of the way.
I think he's a perfect fifth outfielder option for your team next year.
Yeah, I would
Absolutely.
agree. And I want to see him get a little bit more playing time. And Mason Wynn, I want to see how his offense continues. You know, hitting 171 right now. We kind of expected that. And he even told us when he was on the show, you know, it takes me a while to adjust when I get to a new level. I want to start to see some of those adjustments as we get down the stretch here in September. And the thing that's going to be fun to watch, too, all these guys that we're mentioning, it's not like they're going to be playing a bunch of cupcake opponents for the remainder of the year.
Right.
The Cardinals have the second toughest schedule remaining in Major League Baseball. After the Pittsburgh Pirates, everybody they will see down the stretch is a playoff contender or in the playoff picture outside of the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, so those are all really good ones. You know, I'd like to see what this Ryan Helsley thing looks like when he comes back. But to be honest with you, the big three that are in your bullpen right now, I don't trust any of them going into next season, which is why I'm going to say all off season long, go out there and get another big time arm, because Gallegos is inconsistent. Helsley can't stay healthy or available to you. And Jojo Romero, I love what Romero's doing, but I just don't buy it. What I'm seeing right now, I'm worried disappears next year. But let me ask you about this guy, because I can understand somebody's pushback with Nolan Gorman saying, well, he's been injured. His back's plaguing him. But since he's come back from that back injury, which has only been 5 games, and he started 4 of them, he's 1 for 13. And Nolan Gorman, although he started off red hot, and we all were on the page of Nolan Gorman is not going to get traded. And I still don't believe Nolan Gorman's going to get traded unless Logan Gilbert's available to you. But like Nolan Gorman with 11 strikeouts and 13 at-bats, I'd like to see him get locked back in at the end of the season.
I'm not worried about Gorman. I think this is who Gorman is. I mean, you mentioned his hot start. May has a 955 OPS. Let's not forget about his June, where he had a 439 OPS and hit 143 and struck out 30 times.
I don't forget about it. Believe me, I'm very concerned.
This is who he is. He is going to be a streaky hitter, but he's going to have significant power swings. In that month of May, 7 home runs. In July, 7 home runs. And then, of course, June, in this time, he's also been dealing with these back injuries. I think this is just kind of who Nolan Gorman is. He's going to be a guy that when he's hot, he's hitting like 270, and he's slugging the crap out of the baseball and has a 900 OPS. But when he's cold, it's going to be really cold, and it's going to look ugly at times like it has since he's come back from the IL. So I'm not overly concerned. I think part of the thing for him, too, with this most recent coming off the IL stint, he did not go on a rehab assignment. So I think he's still working on getting his timing back after missing the 10 games or whatever it was due to the back soreness. I'm not concerned about him. One guy that I do want to see, and it's not going to be like significant concern if I don't, but it is something to keep an eye on. What does Goldschmidt look like in the final month? Because his slugging has been down. I think it's still at the lowest point that it's been in his career. What does he look like in the final month of the season? Because remember, last year he really dipped off at the very end, went really cold in September. It trickled into October, and part of the reason the Cardinals got bounced. It would be nice to see him have a strong finish to the year here in September and really start to see some more of that slugging, because he's at a 460 slug right now, and just eyeballing it, that is the lowest point in his major league career so far.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good one. Frankly, I think if there were areas that you say nothing can happen to change my mind by the end of the season with this team, I think it's whatever Mason Wynn and Jordan Walker do. Like, that's not really going to sway my opinion. I guess you could say with Tommy Edman, like I think we already discussed that, where he makes sense to be a part of this roster. But everything else, I mean, where are you at on the bullpen? Because I'm pretty adamant about I don't trust those 3 guys as being the 1, 2, 3 next year for you. That would still be something that I think needs to be changed in terms of whatever they do the rest of this season's not going to change my mind.
Yeah, I do think that they're going to have to add to the bullpen in the offseason. Like, I don't question that at all. Partly because of what you said about Ryan Helsley. Like, you have to go in planning that Ryan Helsley can't take the ball 2 days in a row. Ryan Helsley needs probably more time off than a typical reliever, as we've seen. Just because they're more cautious with his arm. I think he's got electric stuff. I think he's going to ultimately be fine in the bullpen. But I do think they have to add to the bullpen. Jojo Romero, Giovanni Gallegos, Ryan Helsley, like, I do feel comfortable with those guys. John King being a part of the bullpen next year. That's 4 arms, but John King's not a high leverage arm. I think you're looking for a arm that can kind of fit into that 6th inning role. That's a high leverage / a middle relief arm for the Cardinals to add this year. And you're also going to get a guy like Packy Naughton back to the equation possibly next year after recovering from surgery. One guy that I'm fascinated to see in the bullpen, mostly because, like, he was all talked about in the offseason, and we never got a chance to see him. Wilking Rodriguez is getting ready to start a rehab assignment. I would really like to see him go through a rehab assignment and get a couple of outings here at the big league level, because he's a guy that he doesn't have to be rostered next year. He just has to be rostered this year because of the Rule 5 draft. But he's a guy that I would really like to see, based on what the Cardinals said of, hey, we claimed this guy on the Rule 5 draft. Why? Because we thought he'd be a difference maker in the bullpen. We never got to see it because he ended up having to have surgery. I want to see him get through a rehab assignment, be healthy, and get a couple appearances here at the big league level. That would be great to see for St. Louis.
We'll talk about that in the 1 o'clock hour, because I want to get into if we think we're going to see any other Cardinals prospects by the end of the season. But there are also a couple of dark horse candidates that I wonder if we're going to see before the end of the season. And Wilking Rodriguez falls into that conversation. He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we'll dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. All right, time to get into the junk drawer here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN alongside Grant Francis and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Get over to our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL to see all of our beautiful mugs from now until 2 o'clock. So do that while we get into our junk drawer. Look at T-Bone. He's already smiling and waving like a prom queen in a parade.
Yeah.
It was a good wave, by the way.
You.
You should be a pageant person.
Yeah, thanks.
Look into
I
that.
should.
T-Bone, what do you got today for us in the junk drawer? Because I got one, too.
I don't know if I would want to go do this or not. I'm kind of having an internal debate. But I don't know how to pronounce this, Bunal, Spain, I think is how it's pronounced.
Sounds great.
They have a annual food fight on the streets, and they set the record for it by having the La Tomatina Food Fight Festival. I don't know if I'd want to go where a bunch of people are having a big food fight.
Why would you want to go to a food fight festival? That's a fun alliteration, though.
It is fun, but I just don't know if I want to go do that. That doesn't sound appealing.
Have you ever been in a food fight?
No.
No? Never happened like at school?
Think of.
Once happened at my high school. That was it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Why?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Why does any food fight start? Because some idiot thinks it's funny to throw his food, and then the other idiot decides to throw their food, and then next thing you know, it's a disaster. I remember it was...
Wait, what was the food that was being flung around at your high school?
It was, I don't know, like some stale cheeseburger or something like that. Just like the worst thing. Like if you throw some type of solid object in a food fight, like what's the... You're supposed to something that splatters.
Yeah.
And when you throw
Like
something
tomatoes.
solid, like tomatoes, unless it's like a full tomato, then you're just throwing a ball at somebody's face. But like you throw a little basket full of spaghetti noodles. That's how you start a food fight. And that's why I never want to be involved with one.
Yeah, no, I'd be out.
Yeah, no, as soon as that happened at high school, I walked out. I'm like, I'm done.
I just I don't know. I don't like the feeling of feeling gross and having tomato all over me would hit that feeling.
When it happens and where it happens, you're in it. Until you can go change out of it. That's like at school when it would happen. Why is this fun for people? You're going to be in this for the rest of the day.
You could change to your PE shirt that you haven't washed since the start of the school year.
We didn't have PE shirts. We just wore
you guys didn't have those?
No, in grade school we did, but not in high school. We just wore whatever clothes we had. That was our PE clothes.
We had them in high school, and I remember I can't remember who it was, someone in my grade by the end of senior year, they pulled out their shirt and it was like a brick.
That's disgusting.
Imagine,
PE is the most overestimated, worst thing ever in terms of what that used to be to what it is now. What it used to be was actual sports and athletics. Now it's
climb and row.
Yeah, now it's you're stretching and you just walk the track. High school kids.
You got to get a good stretch in to walk the track.
He was like, hey, just go walk the track.
So funny story about that. We used to do a thing at my high school called Workout Wednesdays in PE. And
it was the overachiever in PE.
Oh, no, not in high school.
Meanwhile, T-Bone and I are sitting in the stands.
No, actually, this is funny.
I was definitely the overachiever.
Because in high school, sometimes now, but not as much, I used to have nosebleeds all the time. I don't know why. So on Wednesdays, all I'd have to do is tap my nose a few times. It'd start bleeding. I was off to the nurse. I got out of workout
Grant
Wednesday
is a genius.
Every Wednesday.
Grant is a genius. I had a teacher in high school that for PE or gym, he was the softball coach, so he always wanted to do sports. And I'll never forget, he tried to get people to do six-base kickball, essentially what it was. We would go into the gymnasium and it would be the entire gym you'd be playing kickball. And this dude used to just act like he was coaching a softball game. He would be berating the other team. He would play for one team so that he could get the kickball and throw it at people as hard as possible. I'm like, what are we doing here? Why are you a part of this?
I had a teacher for PE in high school, and we were outside playing flag football, and the teacher was demonstrating something. I don't even remember what it was, but she was like, okay, this kid, she's like, line up across from me. Let's practice here. Show everybody what I want you to do. The kid didn't stop. He plowed her over. It was two freight trains running into each other.
That is the best day ever.
It was the highlight, I think, of my 4 years of high school.
No PE class was ever better than dodgeball.
Oh, yeah.
Dodgeball was always the ultimate go-to class that we would do.
See, what sucked is that after middle school, we weren't allowed to play dodgeball anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the softball teacher at our high school.
teacher got a little excited about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, the guy, I think he liked watching pain for people because he used to just make people do it.
That was my 4th grade teacher. We used to play dodgeball in 4th grade, and our teacher would go out and just start like pelting kids with balls.
Like just Billy Madison. You don't get this reference. Do you get this reference with Billy Madison? Mm-mm. Where he's like going back to school and it's with kids and they're playing dodgeball and he grabs it and he's like, now you're all in big trouble. That's what my teacher was. Now, I don't know about 4th grade. Seems like there's lawsuits around that if you're playing dodgeball with those little kids.
It was like 15 years ago. Well, I don't know. I'd have to do some math there.
I was going to say, how old are you?
24. How old are 4th graders?
Well, if somebody just got into their car and said,
10.
what the bleep? I don't know.
I don't
Something
know.
around that.
You had a junk drawer story, by the way.
I did. So has nothing to do with any of this, but I saw something the other day that I think there should be more of an awareness for people, and that's changing diapers in public. There was a viral video of a dad changing his kid's diaper in the bathroom of a restaurant, and they didn't have one of those floating diaper change doors that you see all the time. And so the video is him on his, like he's doing a wall sit, and he's got his kid laying over his knees changing the diaper. And so I think it was John Legend that saw it and was like, oh, there needs to be more of these around because John Legend's got like 7 kids. And so now they're like starting to put these in all of restaurants so the kids can use it. I don't know if people understand how difficult it is to change a child in a restaurant.
What's your most traumatic public changing story for your kids?
Oh, I got a lot of them. So far, it's the exploding diaper. Like when you have all the way up and around, and there's none of those doors, you know what you have to do? Put the kid on the bathroom floor. And you know what is the most disgusting thing ever? A public bathroom floor.
Yeah,
and if they're not there, and let me tell you, they're either not there or next time you're in one, just drop it down and watch it. Because typically they're not level. They're not attached to the wall. They're like barely dangling onto the wall. People on YouTube can see my picture of this. They're barely hanging off the wall by like 2 bolts. And then the actual part where you're supposed to put your child is like a 90-degree angle down towards the ground.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Because now I got to do this like gymnastics things that I'm not physically prepared for to hold it up with my knee while my squirming 2-year-old with poop everywhere is sitting on the thing and I'm trying to change her. It is a nightmare. And then what's even worse is when they put it like in the open of the bathroom and not in one of the stalls.
Oh, yeah, that's...
Because now you're changing a kid where everybody else is using the bathroom, and it's a nightmare.
I thought every place had to have
I did
those.
too, but apparently, like, after this guy's video went viral, apparently, like, John Legend talked about how, like, at least in California, like, they are not as common as you think. And I didn't know that either.
By the
So
way, the 573 says go out to the car and do the change. There you go.
how do you change it in the car?
I'm sure you just lay the. Well, I don't know. I guess you lay the kid on the back seat. But
Well, back seat. I got car seats.
Yeah, exactly.
You've seen my car. There's no way to do that.
I guess like if you had like I've seen your car,
Like in the trunk.
maybe open up the trunk and kind of lay him down a little easier.
But then the problem is now
Your car smells.
Yeah, now my car smells like duty.
Well, then leave the windows open when you go back into the
Look,
restaurant.
it's an epidemic that more people need to be aware of.
An epidemic.
An
Wow.
epidemic that more people need to be aware of. Be on the lookout for more changing tables and bathrooms.
Put them on the floor, build their immune system. We're young.
God, I had to do that. I don't even remember. It was when we were on vacation. I had to go in there and I put my daughter on the floor and I looked at her and I go, do not tell your mother that I am doing this. And hopefully she's not listening right now. But I'm like, if your mother finds out that I'm changing you on a pee-filled bathroom floor, I will never hear the end of it. So just make sure that every restaurant you go to has one of those diaper changing tables and think of me when you do that. Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. When we come back, it is officially football season, which means our pick'em is back. We'll explain everything and make our picks for this weekend next year on 101 ESPN. All right, that's right. Our pick'em is officially back. Now, I got to put some, blinking red lights caveat next to it. The actual competition doesn't start until next week because, let's be honest, we don't have NFL games to get into. It is week 1 of the college football season, which some of these are not the easiest. BK's not here, so we're going to push the actual start to the competition to next week. But we are going to be doing it. We're going to be doing the punishments. We do have some rules that the three of us have to agree upon, T-Bone, once BK gets back, of how we're going to be doing it. If we're going to do it the same way where we all have 3 games, or if we're going to divvy that up a little bit. But the punishments will be once a week or once a month to the loser who loses the most in that month. And the punishments are going to be geared toward YouTube. So it's not going to be like where we're out in public where we did the dress up like a snowman. It's going to be more so of BK dressing up in that dirty Disney princess outfit that made T-Bone and I both want to vomit. Things like that. Pain and embarrassment is the name of our punishments this season in the studio. So T-Bone's beer mile.
The
both
highlights,
pain and embarrassing.
I was gonna say, the highlights of last year, the beer mile, the drinking the coffee with mayo in it.
Oh, yeah, that
I gotta
was
say,
rough.
my favorite was still the one where BK went out in the snowman costume and sang carols.
Oh, yeah, that one was good. That one of the chest waxing. It was very fun for me to wax.
Who got what?
That was
him?
my chest. He got waxed the first time around. Mine got waxed the second time around.
That mayonnaise one, I was listening and it made me want to gag.
That mayonnaise one, I don't think I drank coffee for 2 weeks after that.
It'd be ruined.
It would have ruined it for me forever.
Yeah, and then the handcuff. I thought the handcuff one was good too that we had on BK.
Yeah, because he complained the whole time.
That's why it was fun. He
have to have it on during break?
because we started it for the entire week. He's like, I'm not doing this the whole week. I can't do this the whole week. It was amazing. So anyway, our punishments will be back. We'll explain them next week. We'll explain everything that goes into it. But we still are going to be doing our pick.
We want to win you money.
That's darn right. And if you know how BK and Ferrario works, BK sucks at them. I'm mediocre. T-Bone 1 year was mediocre. Actually, T-Bone 1 year was really bad. And then last year he was good. And Grant is the ultimate curse.
Yeah.
So that's how our bets go.
Pick against what I say and
Grant,
you'll be rich.
Fade me, fade BK, and we'll give T-Bone about 2 weeks to decide if we're going to fade him or not. So let's go through it. We've got 6 college football games that we are all going to tell you which way we're going to side, and then you decide if you're going to fade with us or go with us. Let's start with Colorado at number 17, TCU. We talked about this earlier. This is my most intriguing game in terms of interest of what these two teams are. The spread is set for minus 20.5 for TCU. T-Bone, what are you starting with?
I actually like Colorado plus 20.5 in this one. I think that team is going to be fired up for Deion Sanders to show that they're not the bottom dwellers in the Pac-12 anymore. So I think they actually will cover this. TCU's got a lot to replace from last year's team. I actually like the Colorado, where are they, the Buffaloes, to cover.
The Rams?
No, that's
the
Colorado
Buffaloes.
State.
Are they?
That's right. I think Colorado's going to cover against TCU. I think they lose, but I think they're going to cover.
All right, Grant.
I'm the same way. I don't think they're going to win, but I think Colorado covers. I think that's a program that hasn't really had a lot of excitement over the recent years. And now that Deion Sanders is there, they have something to play for. So I think Colorado's going to cover, but I don't think they're going to win.
I actually am going to go TCU here. I think it's going to be close in the first quarter, and then I think you're going to start to see the newness of Colorado with Deion Sanders take place, and I think TCU is going to get their strides on par, and I think TCU is going to show why they're a ranked opponent. So I'm actually going to take TCU covering the 20.5 points. All right, Washington, number 10 Washington, who is a 14-point favorite on the road at Boise State. T-Bone?
I like Washington in this one to cover 14. I do think it's going to be an interesting game. Boise State's always a good non-power 5 team, but Washington, they are at home, by the way. Home versus Boise State, minus 14. Michael Penix, great quarterback. I think Washington covers the 14 spread. I think they win by like 17.
I think I'm going to go with Washington covering here, too. Boise State has had their years in the past. I just don't see it. And with Penix, I like him a lot as well. So I think I'm going to go with Washington covering those 14 points.
Sweep it. I'm doing Washington as well. Boise State, even Washington being on the road, I know you're going to go home team, but I think Washington's going to have ease with that 14-point spread. So now we've got the Carolinas. The one gets to be the Supreme Carolina at the end of this game, right? That's how this works.
This is going to be a great game.
I'm looking forward to this one. One, because you get to find out what South Carolina is, and two, if North Carolina truly is a ranked team or not. So it's a 2.5-point spread favorite for UNC, and they're on the road at South Carolina. Grant, let's start with you.
I'm not even looking at the spread in this one. I'm taking South Carolina straight up. I like South Carolina to win this game. I think Spencer Rattler coming back. UNC was good last year, but I just like South Carolina more this year than last year, and they weren't terrible last season. Like, they weren't great, but they weren't terrible. So I think in a big game against UNC, coming in with some expectations being ranked, I like South Carolina to win this one.
T-Bone?
I'm going to stick with North Carolina in this one. They've been great since Mac Brown got there and having a high-powered offense. I think that continues. I think it's going to be close, but I think it's 2.5. I like to take teams when it's 2.5 line because you win by a field goal, you're safe. So I'm going to take North Carolina. I think it's close. I take them -2.5.
Yeah, I actually am going to go North Carolina also here. I'm with you, Grant. I like South Carolina more, but as T-Bone mentioned, if I'm going to go the betting side of this one, a field goal and you win this one. UNC could lose by a point and South Carolina could get within striking distance and still lose this one. So I think the UNC is going to pull out and make that cover for 2.5. All right, the ranked game. You've got the big one of the weekend, LSU, FSU. LSU is ranked number 5, FSU is ranked number 8, and LSU is the 2-point favorite, and they're on the road.
I like LSU. I think Brian Kelly did a great job last year. I love their quarterback. Florida State always feels like a team that gets overhyped. I think it's happening again to them. I think LSU wins. I think it's by more than I don't think it's like 3 points. I think they win by double digits. So I say LSU -2.
See, I'm actually going to go on the Florida State side of things, and usually I lean towards the SEC. If this game was at LSU, I would not be picking Florida State. But the fact that it is at Florida State, I think they're going to get up for this game. I like Florida State.
This one screams upset. I know it's
agree.
It's 5-8, but this one screams upset. The hard part, though, once again, is it's a 2-point spread, which always makes me super nervous on that side of it. But I'm actually going to go with Grant here. I'm going to take Florida State. LSU, I'm with you, T-Bone. Brian Kelly did a great job last year. Did I say Brian Kelly, right?
Yeah.
For some reason, I just had this Chip Kelly fear in my head.
He's at UCLA.
That makes sense. I feel like he did such a good job, but LSU was just so up and down last year. Or at one moment you were like, oh, damn, they're going to be one of these teams at the end. And then the next is like, oh, yeah, that's what they really look like. And FSU always seems to play tough games. So that's the one I'm going to side with this one is they're the 2-point underdog. 2 more to get to. We'll do Clemson at Duke. Clemson's ranked number 9, and they've got a 13-point favorite against Duke. This one seems pretty simple to me. I think Clemson covers.
Yeah, I do too. Again, I think this is going to be one of those where I could see a scenario where if Duke keeps it close, that Clemson gets put on upset watch. But I just trust them enough to where I think Clemson's going to win this one. I think if they win, this line's about right. I think they win by 2 touchdowns.
I'm sorry, Grant?
Yeah, I don't really trust Clemson, but I trust them more than I have faith in Duke to cover 13 points. So I'm going to go with Clemson here, too.
All right, final one. We'll start with the Fighting Illini favorite, -9.5 against Toledo on the road. T-Bone?
I think the Illini, they win.
They're home, right?
Yeah, they're home.
I was going to say, I don't know why I said that on the road.
I think they win, but I don't think they cover. I think this game's going to be tough. Toledo's one of the best in the MAC. Illinois' non-con schedule is tough, and they've got Kansas right after that. I like the Illini to win, but I would say that Toledo will cover the +9.5.
That's where I'm at also. I think Toledo covers that +9.5. I think it's going to be closer than what people are giving them credit for.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of games in that first week aren't super competitive. But I'm going to go with Toledo covering here, too. I think this is one of those games that is going to be really competitive. I think Illinois wins, but I think it's going to be a close one till the end. I don't think the 9.5 gets covered by Illinois.
How do you guys feel about your picks?
Like I'm undefeated.
I always feel fine, and it never works out usually.
Good news is this is just getting our feet warm, right? For next week when we actually put this to the test.
The thing about next week, though, that I always love is that at least you get to see them in action.
Yeah.
Like next week's going to be fun.
And we get some NFL games in there, too, which is always good.
And I think next week will be fun because you get Texas and Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, in the primetime window.
That'll be a good game.
The games don't start to get to entertaining in college football until, week 3? So when you start to get a little bit more entertaining matchups?
I think you get it's probably closer to like week 5 when you get to more conference play games. But
Yeah.
I think there are a handful that are always exciting once you start the season. You get those non-conference games that are always fun to watch.
I think you get some exciting games in week 1. The problem with college football is a lot of the times you just don't know what these teams are until you see them for a couple games. So from the pick'em side of it, it's really difficult to make your picks in week 1, but after a couple weeks, then you can start making your picks. But it always happens, especially in week 1, you're going to get those upsets.
Well, we'll see who reigns supreme for our week 0 pick'em challenge on BK and Ferrario. Alongside Grant Francis and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we talked about guys that we want to see more from by the end of September for the Cardinals. But is there a chance that we get to see some Cardinals top prospects before the end of the season? We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We've got One's Gotta Go coming up in our next segment, so you send us these scenarios. We will tell you which one's gotta go. Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Also our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. So, of course, the final month of the season, you're going to get the September call-ups, T-Bone, but we know the September call-ups seem to be, at least Lynn Worthy was the one that tweeted it yesterday, the Post-Dispatch, Lars Nootbaar and Ryan Helsley being activated for the Cardinals. So it seems the roster's set for the rest of the season, but as we move along, you could always see some other names pop up if injuries take place and have to fill that roster in certain areas. Do we see any other guys that people want more of by the end of the season? What I mean by that are these prospects that have had success in the minors. I'm talking Graceffo, McGreevy. I don't think Tin Kens falls into this category. Maybe Connor Thomas, although he's had a rough go about it. Any of these prospects who continue to rise in the Cardinals farm system, do they fall into this conversation of seeing them by the end of the season for you?
Yeah, I'm fascinated to know what the plan is with Gordon Graceffo and with Michael McGreevy, guys that have had really good years in AAA with Memphis this year, especially McGreevy. I'm fascinated to know if the Cardinals just try to get them a cup of coffee this year. They may not. They may decide, you know what, they're getting close to their innings limits in their year this year at AAA, so let's just have them stick there. Maybe we shut them down near the end. But I would be interested to see those guys get a cup of coffee, where maybe it is the AAA season comes to an end, and you say, you know what, let's call up a Gordon Graceffo. Let's have him work out of the bullpen like they used to do, like when Lance Lynn first got called up. He started in the bullpen. Maybe you try and do something that way just so they can see what it's like at the major league level, and they get an idea of, like, how does my stuff play here at the major league level? And then they have some sort of an idea what they can work on in the offseason. Those are probably the two guys for me. I think there's a chance that we could potentially maybe see Ivan Herrera again at some point, but we'll see. But I think Graceffo and McGreevy are the guys that I would like circle and say, I understand if the Cardinals did not call them up, but I would like to see them just get like a couple of innings here at the big league level. And it doesn't even have to be starting. It could just be out of the bullpen.
Yeah, and I don't think any of that makes a difference in terms of how they fare into the 2024 season, right? Like, you bring one of these guys up and they get 2 innings out of the bullpen in a week, and it looks good. It doesn't turn into, oh, well, he's going to be a starting candidate next year. It's just going to more being, okay, he can pitch against the majors. Let's figure out what our adjustments need to be and focus on it again next year. So regardless if we see him, you're right. I don't think it hurts a team to put guys into position. Was it McGreevy or Graceffo that came back from the injury that said that I thought it was McGreevy.
Graceffo dealt with an injury earlier.
Gotcha, because he was the one that said he's still not back to himself. So that's also going to fare into this. But other than those two, and maybe Connor Thomas, but again, I kind of seems like we know what Connor Thomas is, although minor league stats, if we're looking at what Zach Thompson's doing now compared to what he did then in AAA, shouldn't really matter. But does Connor Thomas change into your plans? I don't think so. Ivan Herrera should get some more reps so you can decide, is he a part of this team? Are we trading this player from this team? But those are really the only guys that fall into this category in terms of prospects.
Yeah, and they'll probably tell you, like, we can't put a McGreevy or a Graceffo. We can't call them up. Why? Because the 40-man. You've got so many guys on this roster on the 40-man that it don't matter in terms of they're not a part of the future here in St. Louis. And you're going to have to figure it out anyway, especially if Wilking Rodriguez is able to come back. So I would like to see them at least explore the idea of bringing McGreevy or Graceffo up just for a cup of coffee at the big league level, just to see what they look like. But I can understand if they said, you know what, 40-man, we don't want to mess around with that. We don't want to put them on to this roster because the 40-man roster spot that they're accompanying is going to be too important in the offseason. But I would still like to see those guys at least pitch this year at the big league level.
So let's go beyond the prospects, because those guys not even playing into the 2024 season. Maybe if injuries pop up, but hopefully the success of this offseason comes into play and you're not even worried about that. What about the one that you named? Because if there's two guys that I want to see more of, and one of them's been up and down with injuries, up and down of unsure of what they want to do, it's Guillermo Zuniga and Wilking Rodriguez. And I don't know what Zuniga's injury update is in terms of if he's going to be available to use them. But those two guys, I'd probably want to see more than anybody out of that bullpen by the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't know about Zuniga. I don't know what the status update is on him. The only thing I know about Rodriguez is he is going on a rehab assignment. So he's the guy that I would really like to see because of what we talked about earlier, you know, that you claim him on the in the Rule 5 draft. So you really locked in a spot for him on the 40-man roster because you cannot send him back down to the minors. Otherwise, you have to send him back to the New York Yankees where they acquired him from. It'd be great if he's able to get healthy and you get a chance to see him and see, okay, this is why we selected him in the Rule 5 draft. This is why we thought he was going to be a big part of our bullpen. It would be nice to feel a little bit more comfortable with him on the 40-man roster going into next year. But again, that just stems from health. You hope that he can get through a rehab assignment and get through it healthy, and you can see his stuff play the way that you were expecting to. So, Zuniga, I don't know anything about his elbow and what the issues remain with him, so I wouldn't count on anything from him this season.
Those guys are really the only other pieces that can change your opinion on the bullpen, which is why, not to live in the past, I wanted them to claim somebody off of the waiver wire, right? Like, I wanted them to get one of those bullpen arms, whether it was Moore or Ronaldo Lopez, so that you could say, let's see if this guy figures it out.
But the only thing with those guys, and again, like, I can't really push back on that because, like, having Suarez, Barnes, and I don't remember the other, Casey Lawrence, like, those guys aren't a part of the future. So, like, it's not like the rotation where you are throwing young arms, and I can understand saying, let's not go get a Giolito because we want to learn what we have in our system. I just don't know if there's much to gain from paying the Matt Moore the month left in his salary or the Ronaldo Lopez the month left in his salary because they've probably got a good idea of what those guys are without having to bring them in here in St. Louis. That's the only quote-unquote pushback I would give to that. So I understand them not adding those guys.
Maybe, but I just... what if you get somebody who fits into that? And I mean, I don't want to rehash what we talked about yesterday, but it doesn't make sense to me. But T-Bone, you had some audio. It was from MLB Network, correct? Talking about the waiver wire.
Yeah. So we talked about the waiver wire yesterday, and the Cardinals not claiming anybody. And you had Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, and Matt Moore go to Cleveland. And I kind of thought this at the time when all those Angels were placed on waivers. Like, man, I didn't like the August trade deadline, and I really don't like this. And I'll let Jim Bowden, friend of the show, by the way,
baby,
explain how I think this is bad for baseball. This is from MLB Network Radio earlier today.
And the Angels decided, well, we're incompetent. We don't know what we're doing. So we're going to put everybody on waivers now because we don't know how to manage our payroll. So here they are. We don't care about the pennant race or the integrity of the game. At the trade deadline, the Guardians weren't able to trade for Giolito. They weren't able to trade for Lopez. They weren't giving up 2 of their top 5 prospects to get them. So now they get them for free 28 days later in the middle of a pennant race. And no other contending team had a chance to get those 3 pitchers. I thought yesterday was one of those moments where those waiver claims should have been nixed because it's not fair to the Minnesota Twins, who built their team the right way, did what they had to do at the trade deadline, and now a month later with a 5-game lead have to watch Cleveland gain 3 players and they couldn't even bid to get them.
I 100% agree with him.
Yeah.
Like, that is trash. That's why we were talking about this in the office. That's why they rid, what was it? It was like where you could trade.
It was basically the same thing where you could put a guy on waivers.
But you had to trade for him.
Someone could claim him, you had to work out a trade, but you could pull him back.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, and that's how Verlander got to Houston his first time around, where Detroit traded him in August. I 100% agree with Jim Bowden. And look, we talk about it. We talked about, claiming looking at Giolito, claiming him, bringing him in. I think that whole waiver thing should be scrapped from Major League Baseball moving forward.
Or at least allowing them to be on a postseason roster.
And this is where I would say, like, people would say, well, how are you going to stop the Angels? They wanted to get under the luxury tax. Well, they decided to go all in. They need to eat the cake that they decided to get. So if they wanted to DFA a Giolito and then take that money onto their books, that would be fine by me. I would get that. I thought the whole waiver thing that happened yesterday, I don't know if I would say the integrity of the game was pushed, but it was kind of annoying that it was, oh, okay, we're just kind of giving up. We so desperately have to get under the luxury tax. Let's put some of the top trade targets that were out there at the deadline onto the market for free for a team like Cleveland, who, to Jim's point, didn't go out there, didn't decide to go in on the deadline, just kind of sat put, did trade Savali, and made their team worse. And now that they've gotten hot, they can go, for free, for limited dollar amounts in the last month of the season, we're going to go out and claim these 3 players. I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me.
And I forgot who put this out there yesterday on Twitter, but I liked it because they said, This once again proves that Major League Baseball's waiver wire should be like fantasy football, to where when one guy is claimed, it resets the table. So if the Cleveland Guardians, if they want Lucas Giolito, which does not fit the mold of what we're talking about, if it takes away the integrity of the game, because you shouldn't be able to just claim Lucas Giolito after everybody was soughting after him. But after they claim one guy, they don't get to claim anybody else, and they go to the bottom of the table. And then the next player is able to jump in. Like the fact that they could claim Lopez, Giolito, and Matt Moore because of their record being in a playoff position and nobody else gets an opportunity to, that's the part that's a little trashy to me.
And I will say this, like, I would just get rid of the waiver thing completely. Like, I wouldn't worry about it in terms of what happened this year. I do think this was just a one-off. I don't think we're going to see the amount of talent that we saw get placed on waivers this year happen that often. It just so happened to be a team like the Angels so desperately needed to get below the luxury tax, and they failed so miserably at the trade deadline that they were able to do this with 5 or 6 players. I can't remember how many they put on waivers, half their team essentially. And then, like, the Bader one, like, I think the Bader one is the one that you will see more often when we move forward, where a player gets put on waivers. Why? Because that team, the Yankees, for example, want to get a player that's in their system playing time.
Right.
And the best thing to do for them was to move on from Harrison Bader. I don't think the talent level that we saw get moved at this year's deadline will be, or at this year's waiver deadline, will be as significant in future years. But because of what we saw this year, I hope there are some changes to how the system works.
Yeah, because hopefully an organization is not run as badly as the Angels are next season in Major League Baseball. Although the Angels will still be there.
Oh, yeah.
It just gets worse from here.
They'll be even worse without Ohtani.
Yeah, that's very true if they don't get Ohtani. He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, one's got to go. We wrap up the weekend. You send us 4 scenarios. We will tell you which one's got to go. 314-399-9646. That's our Air Comfort Service text line. One's got to go next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, Mizzou takes down South Dakota 35-10. They start out 1-0 on the season. And Brady Cook had a good night at quarterback, 17 for 21, 172 yards, and a touchdown. Tonight for the Cardinals, they'll be back in action at Busch Stadium as they host the Pittsburgh Pirates for a 3-game set. Dakota Hudson gets the start in the first game of that set with the Pirates. It'll be Mitch Keller for Pittsburgh, the righty, who's 11-8 on the season with a 4.01 ERA. First pitch will be at 7:15. And then tomorrow night, City SC back in action against Sporting KC. St. Louis 15-9-2 on the season, first in the Western Conference. Kansas City 7-11-8, fourth worst in the West. St. Louis did beat Kansas City 4-0 earlier in the season. Kickoff for that one will be at 7:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
(314-399-9646). That is the Air Comfort Service text line. Our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It is time for One's Gotta Go. It's how we wrap up Fridays. We wrap up the week here on BK and Ferrario. You send us 3 scenarios. We'll tell you which one's gotta go. 314-399-9646. Let's start with this one. One's Gotta Go condiment edition. Everybody loves their condiments, especially T-Bone on his hot dogs.
Oh, yeah. Had
Ketchup,
hot dogs last night.
mustard, mayo, or ranch?
So ketchup, mustard, stay.
Obviously.
It's got to be mayo. I hate mayo. That stuff's disgusting.
I don't know what you use a lot of mayo for.
Well, I know like some people use it on a sandwich. Some people put on like a cheeseburger, which is disgusting to me. I like ranch. Not enough to like put it on my pizza, but I like it on a salad. So mayo's the one that's easy for me. That's got to get out of here.
Grant?
I hate all condiments.
That's true.
So
You eat
they
chicken
can all
bland
go.
every single day.
Seasoned.
No,
just
it's
no
not
sauce.
seasoned. He says it's seasoned, but we can't see anything on there. He's just one of those guys that just drinks white chicken, right? Boiled chicken.
Did you say drinks?
Yeah, you mix it up. I don't know, man. It's almost the weekend. No, the answer here is ketchup.
What?
Ketchup is just awful.
Yeah, it's not good.
I don't put ketchup on anything.
Really?
Yeah. I don't do it on a burger. I don't do it on a hot dog. I don't dip it in fries. I don't use ketchup.
That's a terrible take.
No, it's not. And
Ketchup's phenomenal.
I've talked about this. And it was the whole hot dog debate when Brooke was having it on the morning show. The man who runs Nathan's hot dog eating contest says, if you put ketchup on your hot dog, you're a child. So, like, there's a cutoff. Once you turn about 18, probably don't drink ketchup or use ketchup anymore.
No, that's terrible. Ketchup is great on cheeseburgers, hot dogs, with French fries, tater tots.
No, you know what's good on burgers? Barbecue sauce. You know what's good on tater tots? Hot sauce.
I can barely-
You know what's good with fries? Ranch dressing.
I can barely take the smell of barbecue sauce.
See, I'm that way with ketchup, and now that my girls eat it with everything, I don't like the substance of ketchup. Like when it dries, oh, it's awful.
That's how I am. Like, I don't like dressings, so I don't really eat salad. Although I do, but I'll put olive oil on it. Like, I don't like dressings.
Yeah,
I work at a restaurant, and sometimes people will ask me, like, oh, like, what's your best dressing? I'm like, I don't know. I don't eat salad. Like, a lot of people like this, but
Grant is
I'm the wrong person to ask.
Grant's the worst person in terms of waiting tables. It's like, oh, what would you recommend? I don't know. I don't eat any of this crap. All right, let's do this one. NHL division. One's got to go. The Central, the Metro, the Atlantic, the Pacific.
I like this one.
Yeah, I saw this one, and it's interesting. So I'm not getting rid of the Central, obviously.
Obviously, because they're going to have the Stanley Cup champs and the Blues.
Yeah, I wouldn't get rid of the Pacific because you've got Connor McDavid in that division along with Leon Draisaitl, and like that's exciting in itself. I think the one that I would get rid of, looking at the Eastern Conference, I think it's the Metropolitan. I don't think there's a team, like, don't get me wrong, there are good teams in the Metro. There's not a team that I'm really excited to watch them play hockey. Like, Pittsburgh's getting old, Washington's getting old. I guess you could say Columbus is on the up. New Jersey's good. Carolina's a good team, but Carolina's like a boring good team. I would say the Metro's got to go. At least in the Atlantic, you get Tampa Bay, who's great. You get Toronto, that even if they're not good or not, they always will have some sort of storyline around them. I would get rid of the Metropolitan Division.
See, I'm not getting rid of the Metro. You got a lot of good rivalries there. You got Islanders, Rangers. You got the Devils with those two teams as well. Carolina's been good for quite some time now. I'm getting rid of the Pacific, and I get the argument that, like, you have Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. Like, Edmonton never goes anywhere because they're so top-heavy on their first line and their offense. They don't go anywhere. They have no goaltending. So from a team standpoint and a success standpoint, I'm getting rid of the Pacific. You got Vancouver, who's been bad for a long time. You've got San Jose, who's in the basement. Calgary hasn't been great. They had their year a couple years ago, but last year they weren't good. Anaheim's been bad for a while. Like, Pacific has a lot of bad teams. So I'm getting rid of the Pacific.
Yeah, I think I agree with Grant there on the Pacific. Like, other than Edmonton, I don't really know the dynamic players that the Pacific have.
Yeah.
Like Vegas, in about 3 years, I think they're going to be old and have to really do a turn. LA's up and coming. Seattle's kind of in that tweener. And Calgary, Vancouver, San Jose, and Anaheim are all rebuilding. So, like, I got 2 exciting teams, 1.5 exciting teams in the Pacific, whereas at least in the Metro, Carolina, New Jersey, they're going to be good for a while. And then Columbus is up and coming. And then in the Atlantic, I think Tampa's going to be bad soon, even though they do have Braden Point. Boston already is going to be bad. And then Buffalo's kind of an exciting team. Same can be said about Ottawa.
636 brings up a good point. 9 o'clock starts can go.
That's
Very true.
So,
Very true.
Pacific's definitely out now at that point.
Not as bad as bubble NHL start times.
Oh, no. Bubble
Those
Angels.
are brutal.
T-Bone experienced that firsthand when we got the 9:30 Vancouver starts every
my
night.
gosh.
We didn't wrap up post games until like 1:30 in the morning.
No, and I wouldn't. At the time, I was living with my grandparents. I wouldn't get home till like 2:30, and then like you're amped from doing the game.
Yeah.
So like
You don't
you're up-
sleep.
I was up till like 5. I'd dream my grandpa when he'd get up at 5 a.m. and
Grandpa
go,
would be
"Oh,
like,
Grandpa, I'm going to bed now."
What the hell are you doing
See,
up?
at that time in the bubble, I was working for the Islanders, and that was the year they made the conference finals. So they had...
His was more exciting than ours, T-Bone.
Oh, it was exciting, but they had so many games that went to like double overtime, and
We had one that went to overtime, and they lost, and it was like, oh, God, I stayed up late to watch them lose an overtime game.
Didn't they lose quickly too? If I
They
remember
lost in
correctly?
5. They only won 1 game.
Well, no,
Oh,
I
no, they
meant
lost
that-
in 6.
I meant the overtime because I feel like
Oh.
it was like, man, we're going to be
Yeah,
here
it
forever.
was pretty
And then they
quick.
lost in like a couple minutes.
Yeah, no, they did tie up the series because then I was like, oh, God, they're going to go to the next round, and this is going to be forever.
Braden Shin had an overtime winner in that series. I remember.
Look at this guy. This is why he does the questions on the hockey gauntlet
Yeah.
over here. One's got to go Labor Day barbecue edition. Oh, you know I'm in on this one. Steaks, brisket, burgers, ribs.
I would say burgers because I think burgers is more. You can do those anytime, if that makes sense. You kind of
Yeah, like you're
going to
go special for Labor Day.
But brisket, I would love. Ribs would be great. Shame I'm grilling by myself and aren't good at making either one of those.
Sad day. Am I right, buddy?
Can I get an invite to your
Come
barbecue?
on over, buddy.
Great.
My wife's out of town, so party at my
All right.
place.
We're gonna watch college football all day at your place on Saturday.
we're gonna watch Tangled. That's my it's my daughter's new favorite Disney movie, and we're gonna do a lot of dress up. We've now ventured into painting toenails, so come on over, buddy.
As fun as that sounds,
You don't wanna paint your toenails?
I'm gonna stick at home, stick with my hot dogs.
Let me tell you something.
And watch college
If
football.
there's ever a Disney finish the lyrics contest, I promise you I will 100% that.
That and Beyonce.
I would hope so.
That and Beyonce. Well, I heard Tanner didn't do so well with the Beyonce one.
I would definitely get rid of the burgers though.
Well, first of all, I'd be getting all of these things plain.
Because it's not chicken. You'd get rid of all of them because he would just want chicken.
No, that's not true. I like steak. I like burgers. I just don't like barbecue sauce
He's
on
the
them.
guy that
boiled
shows
chicken.
up and goes,
I
"Where's
brought
the
chicken."
pasta salad?"
Oh, God, no.
He's the guy
I
that
like
says,
salad. We've been over this.
he's the guy that says, where's the veggie tray?
Nah.
Celery? Anybody?
I will say grilled vegetables are awesome.
Come on, man.
Grilled vegetables
Come
are
on to
really
the
good.
good stuffs here.
But I would probably get rid of ribs.
Really?
See, I
That'd
would
be
too.
what I'd go with.
For some reason, I don't like ribs as much anymore.
Oh, I love ribs.
It feels like you're doing so much work for so little meat.
Well, can't the same? Well, Okay, I guess that's not true. For the so little meat part.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say doing so much work. I was like, well, can't that be true of like brisket if you're doing
but
brisket?
like you've got all of that left over. Like
That's fair.
what I mean by work is like you cook it and then you're pulling it apart, you're eating it, you're getting all messy with it, and it's like 2 bites and it's gone.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the part for me. It's like, I'd rather have a little bit more substance with it, which is why I started grilling brisket, which remember I cut my finger off when I was grilling brisket. That's my new favorite thing. I got gloves now, so I don't cut my finger off with that one anymore. One's got to go from the 618 workout edition. Biking, running, weightlifting, or swimming?
All of the above.
All of the above.
If I had to choose just one, actually, I don't mind biking, but I would definitely say weightlifting. I hate weightlifting. I hated doing it in college. I hated doing it in high school. I'm out on the weightlifting. Running, like, I can get by with that. I don't mind doing swimming, but lifting weights, I just hate being sore the next day. So I say weightlifting's got to go.
See, that sore feeling is actually good because I feel like I've done something. Like,
yeah, I've hurt myself is what I feel like.
But like when you feel sore, you're like, oh, good, I've made progress. Like I've done good. I did good.
I don't agree with that because
Yeah.
when I run and I feel sore, I don't feel like I made progress.
And when I do weightlifting, I feel sore. You know what my reaction is? I'm done for a week. Actually, probably a lot longer than that.
Yeah. Honestly, though, like the one for me, I wish I did it more was swimming. Like, because obviously they've talked about I have a pool, but mine's a very above ground circle pool. There's not a whole lot of swimming in it. It's just dive in and you're done. Mine would be running. Like at least biking, I can do something that, you know, I'm actually feeling the exercise with it in terms of pedaling. And, you know, I don't like anything about running. I think it's just obnoxious. I tell you this all the time, Grant. You do it too. I think you're crazy.
I love running.
I hate it. I hate it because I'm bored.
You have to go to different places. You can't run on the treadmill. That's terrible because I can't be in the same spot and it just gets boring looking at the four walls around me.
But then I got to go run somewhere where other people are at.
No, you don't. You
That's
find
not
secluded
bad.
spots.
No.
Like, I go to parks. Like there's usually not many people.
If I'm feeling a little frisky and I'm running like a trail or something, I do like a sound effect when I go by them.
Why don't you just make those in your own head? Meow,
Yeah.
meow.
It makes me feel fast. I like the flash, baby.
Let's wrap it up with this one. One's got to go St. Louis Sports Coach Edition. Ollie Marmol, Craig Berube, Eli Drinkowitz, or Bradley Carnell?
So Carnell stays. He's been great at City. I mean, I think all four should stay, but I guess I got to choose one.
That's not how the game works, my man.
I still have faith in Ollie. And you said, who was the other two?
Berube and Drink.
Right? I would probably... Oh, man. I
This is
guess,
tough.
I guess I would say Drink, but I'm actually gaining more... He has one good year.
Especially
he
with
wins
the
7-8 games
recruiting.
this year in his recruiting. Like, it's tough to get better from that. But I believe in Ollie Marmol. I don't think he went from being a good manager to a bad manager this year. Craig Berube, I think he's a great coach in the NHL, and there's a reason the Blues stuck with him. And Carnell, as we've seen, great with his system here. I don't even like the idea of getting rid of Drink, but I guess he's the one that has the least
success.
Well, I guess people would argue Ollie, but I think he was great last year. So
Yeah. Great.
That's where I'm at too. I mean, you can't get rid of Carnell for the season they've had. You can't get rid of Berube. He's won a Stanley Cup, and he's a good coach. Like he just is.
Yeah. Don't tell Blues fans that though, because they don't agree.
Well, we're just a little upset right now, but
Aren't we all?
I think it comes down between Ollie and Drink, and I'm kind of with you. I think Ollie's a good manager. He was just sort of dealt a bad hand this season. Things just didn't go the way, it was thought it was going to go, sort of like Craig Berube last year. So I think it's Drink.
Yeah, I think it's Drink too. And I think it's just because of the success. It sucks because of the recruiting, but my hope is I can find somebody who can continue that recruiting success if the team is successful, and that's the part that I'd go with on that one. Appreciate all the text messages for One's Gotta Go. Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll rewind it and close out the week next here on 101 ESPN. Time to rewind it here on BK and Ferrario, but want to remind you, you could join 101 in ESPN and Bud Light for Blues and Brews on Friday evening, September 22nd at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. Get fired up for the blues season at this outdoor street party. It features live music from country music star Chris Lane and local blues musician Marquise Knox. You get appearances by blues players, blues alumni, food trucks, blues merch, 101 ESPN giveaways, and so much more. Tickets are on sale now. You can head over to 101ESPN.com for additional event details and to purchase your tickets for Blues and Brews on September 22nd. It's going to be a fun time, so make sure you get out there and purchase your tickets. Let's rewind it with Mizzou from last night, where you started off the season 1-0. You put up 35 points against a South Dakota team that, frankly, you were very much expected to win that game. But the bigger storyline for me was the quarterback made itself known. And maybe they feel it's more of a quarterback competition. I heard the morning show play the audio of Drink kind of pushing back when people said, why are you going to Sam Horn in the second half there? He's going to do what he wants. Sam Horn looked fine. Brady Cook looked like the guy that you're going to try and win with. And really, it was against South Dakota. Brady Cook has his up and down moments, but if you're going to run the offense the way that it seemed Kirby Moore was trying to accomplish, where you're testing the running, you're seeing what you can do, you're getting those play action moves, and then you're going deep if you have to, that's Brady Quinn. Brady Quinn is the guy for them.
Brady Cook, you mean?
Brady Cook. I'm sorry, Brady Cook.
Yeah, I think Mizzou made it obvious that they view Brady Cook as the number one quarterback right now, because they said they were going to split time between Cook and Horn going into that game. I thought they meant like split in terms of, okay, we're going to be running the same style of offense, which they technically did, but they only had Horn throw the ball 5 times.
Right.
And that made sense because he came in the second half, you're up big, you're just trying to run that game out. You didn't get a good sense as to how Horn runs the offense in terms of the passing game. And I think that was the biggest thing for me is, okay, you let Cook air it out in that full first half. Second half, you did what you said you were going to do in split time, but you didn't run like your full offense. You basically just grounded and pounded in the second half. And I think you saw signs of Sam Horn in his 5 throws that he's got the better arm between him and Brady Cook. But I think Brady Cook's a guy that can play that role that Tommy DeVito did for the Illini last year, where it is, okay, we're just going to get the ball out of the hands quickly of our quarterback. We're going to run guys in motion like Luther Burn, find ways to get the ball in his hands differently, and let our receivers make guys miss once they get the ball and go for those yak yards, yard after catch. I think that's going to be their plan. The good news, though, from leaving the Missouri game was you didn't have any major question mark because they took care of business. I thought the defense looked great, which is going to be a strong suit for them this year. I don't think anything really changed of what we learned. But the good thing is if we learned anything, it was probably bad going up against South Dakota.
Did you gain any more optimism of the decision from Eli Drinkwitz to take off the offensive coordinator hat, just be the head coach, and hand it to Kirby Moore?
I don't think so, because it was a very vanilla game plan, and you could tell that.
Which should have been expected for anybody against South Dakota.
You're not going to have a better sense of what the offense truly is going to look like until you get to that Kansas State game, where they play because they've got Middle Tennessee State next, and then then they host Kansas State, and then they've got Memphis here at the Dome in St. Louis. Those are the games when you're first going to start seeing, okay, this is what the playbook looks like for Kirby Moore. Next game against Middle Tennessee State, that's just going to be another one of these kind of dress-up games. See what you got, see what Brady Cook looks like again, see what Sam Horn looks like again. I actually expect they're probably going to let Sam Horn throw the ball just a little bit more in that second game to see what he looks like throwing. But I don't think you can make a judgment on Kirby Moore's offense just yet.
That's part of what I was wondering. Do they flip roles in that Middle Tennessee game to where Sam Horn starts the first half and Brady Cook starts the second half, so you could get a better idea in starting of the game of him if it's truly a competition?
I don't think so, because Brady Cook was named a captain. And so that means he was voted on by his teammates. And just the fact of the matter that I think he's earned the right to be that guy that is the quote-unquote starter in the first quarter. I did find it interesting, though, that they did elect to do this. When they said split time, they did it first half, second half.
Yeah.
Because what you see a lot of teams do, Utah did this last night, too, against Florida, where they did first half, second half. But, of course, that was a much tougher game against Florida Gators than South Dakota.
Well,
a lot of teams, what you see, do first quarter, second quarter until they really figure out who they have as the starting quarterback.
Makes sense.
Because then you still have the main offense. You're still using most of your playbook. You're not in the second half where you're up big and just running out the clock.
Yeah. All right, so let's do this one more time before we wrap up, because we did it at the beginning of the season before Mizzou started, and now that we saw one game, let's go through this record real quick. So they already want to know, Middle Tennessee win, right? We're all on board with that. Should be a win. K-State, Does your opinion change on the outcome of that game after 1 week of seeing Mizzou?
No, I still think it's a toss-up game, but I would favor Kansas State still. But we'll get a better sense as to what Kansas State looks like, and as we get closer to that
Memphis, I'll agree, win.
Should be a win.
Vanderbilt should be a win. LSU, loss. Kentucky, win.
Toss-up.
I'd lean more towards win, but yeah, toss-up. South Carolina, toss up, but I'd lean more towards win, at least from what we saw, if this offense is real. Georgia loss, Tennessee loss, Florida win, Arkansas win. So we're talking about 3 toss-ups to where this team could either be 7 wins or 9 wins, right?
Yes, I believe so. Because, again, most of these games, we're not going to get a better sense of what this team truly looks like.
Until you see K-State.
Until you see K-State.
Yeah.
But I think they have a chance against a Kentucky. I think they should have a chance against South Carolina. I think they will have a chance against Arkansas. I truly believe after watching Florida last night that game should be pushed into the win category. So I think they are about a 7 to 8 win team. Again, though, they're going to have to win the swing games, and that was the biggest difference last year. We talked about it yesterday. They lose a tough one against Auburn. Georgia wasn't really a swing game, but they were in that game last year against the number 1 team in the country. I think there's reason for legitimate optimism around the Missouri Tiger football program going into this year.
If you trend in the direction of 7, 8 wins, that's success, and that cools off the seat of Eli Drinkwitz to any point. And now you're talking about the recruits coming in and making a significant difference. Again, make sure you're tuned in this weekend for college football action here on 101 ESPN. We got TSU Colorado tomorrow morning. We've got Morehouse College and Virginia Union, Florida State and LSU. So we'll have that for you all weekend long. They will be with you on Monday, Tuesday, because Monday's Labor Day. Tuesday, BK will be back. I'm out next week. The entire gang will be back together in 2 weeks because T-Bone never gets vacations. Appreciate Grant stepping in for BK. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Have a great weekend. Enjoy Labor Day, and we'll talk to you Tuesday for BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN.